I was in high spirits as I packed up my stuff and headed upstairs. I had just finished a big network migration project in Dallas a day early and was able to get home earlier than I had planned. I thought about what I was going to do with Nikki this night as I turned onto the landing before taking the last 5 steps. When I turned around, I saw a man standing at the top of the stairs. My attention was caught by the gun he held in his hand. I stared at the weapon for a moment, and then saw a flash. I seemed to be instantly thrown backwards down the stairs. Then came the blackness. I don't know where my mind was, but I suddenly found myself in bed in an unfamiliar room. It only took me a moment to realize I wasn't in my bed, but I didn't know where I was. The room was dark, but I could hear someone whispering nearby. I tried unsuccessfully to move. I only managed to turn my head a few centimeters. My mind began to drift and I couldn't focus on anything until I recognized Nikki's voice. She was standing by the door talking to a man I couldn't identify because he was facing me. They hadn't noticed that I was awake, so I listened carefully to hear what they were talking about. "What did the doctor tell you?" the man asked. "He said Eric is doing better, but he's not out of danger yet," Nikki replied. "Doctor?" Nikki was talking about me. What did she mean by not out of danger? I tried to make sense of what I was hearing, but I couldn't focus on anything. Nikki seemed to be holding the man's hand while pushing him towards the door. "John, you really shouldn't be in here," she told him. "Does he remember what happened?" "I don't know." Detective Trenka tried to ask him about it yesterday, but Eric was too doped up on painkillers to give any answers, Nikki said. "As soon as he can talk to the police, I want to know what he's going to tell them." "John, please leave before he wakes up and sees you. Besides, Detective Trenka could come back at any moment." "Okay, I'm leaving, but remember what I said." "I will. Now, please leave. I just can't hang out with you right now," said Nikki. I tried to figure out what Nikki and the man were talking about. She called him John, but it meant nothing to me. Nikki started looking in my direction and I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the man was gone, and Nikki was sitting in a chair in front of the dark window. Out of surprise, I wondered if the man was really there or if I had dreamed it. I was about to ask Nikki where I was and who the man was, but I couldn't bring myself to open my eyes. I decided to rest for a minute and then ask Nikki to tell me where I was. Next chapter. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning, and I was looking up at the white-tilled ceiling. The room was quiet, but I could sense that there were other people in it. I turned my head to the right as far as I could, but it wasn't very far. Maybe only 3 or 4 inches, but it was enough to see Nikki sitting by the window. The sunlight coming through the window behind her prevented me from seeing her beautiful face, but I could see that her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying, and she was holding a tissue in her hand. As I watched, Nikki turned away from me and looked out the window. Apparently, she didn't notice that my eyes were open. I turned my head to the left, but no more successfully than the right. But I managed to see this pain in the ass who kept asking me questions I couldn't answer. I didn't know if those questions were a memory or a dream. He was about 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed about 165 pounds. He had curly brown hair that almost matched the color of the suit he was wearing. That suit, it looked like he'd worn it every day for the last 5 years. The elbows were frayed, the pockets were all tattered, and the wide blue tie he wore was not only out of fashion, but didn't match the suit. What puzzled me was that I recognized him as soon as I looked at him, but I didn't know who he was. I vaguely remembered him asking me questions, but couldn't remember what those questions were or why he was asking them. The name that came to mind when I saw him was Curly, but I wasn't sure if that was his name or if I called him that because of his hair. Anyway, Curly was leaning against the wall and reading a newspaper. When he started to lower the paper and peek over the top, I quickly closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I didn't feel like answering questions. By pretending to be asleep, I must have fallen asleep because when I opened my eyes again, the room was empty. Nikki and Curly were gone, and it was dark outside. I must have fallen asleep again. I was upset that I had slept for so long. I wanted to talk to Nikki. I remembered that I wanted to ask her something, but I couldn't remember what. I lay still and listened, trying to make sense of what was happening. Clarity came to me little by little. Obviously, I was in the hospital, but how long I had been there and why was unclear to me. I remembered seeing Nikki sitting by the window 2 or 3 times, and I also remembered that Curly had asked me questions at least once and had seen him leaning against the wall more than once. I couldn't figure out if it had all happened in one day or over the course of several days. What really bothered me was that I didn't realize how long I had been in the hospital or why I was there. The room was quiet, which helped me focus. I tried to recall the last clear memory I had. I lay still, letting my thoughts drift back, and suddenly I remembered something. I remembered coming home from a project in Dallas and walking into the house carrying my bags. I think I set the bags down in the hallway and… What was I doing? I couldn't remember. Had I gone to the kitchen? Had I gone to the bathroom? That must have been it, I thought. I was in a hurry to get home, so I must have really needed the bathroom. I wasn't sure if that was right, but it made sense. Anyway, I remember picking up my bags again and starting up the stairs. As I turned right at the landing to go up to the second floor, I saw someone standing at the top of the stairs. Now I remembered. It was a large guy with dark brown hair, but I couldn't make out his face because my eyes were staring somewhere off to the side. I was staring at the gun he was pointing at me. It felt like it lasted for a very long time, but it was really only a few seconds, and then I saw a flash. I was already falling backwards down the stairs when I heard the loud explosion produced by the gun as it went off. After that, I remembered only fragments of the incident. I vaguely remember waking up in the hospital, Nikki holding my hand and crying. But then again, it could have been a dream. I just wasn't sure of anything. Next chapter. The next time I saw Nikki, she didn't look good. She was very pale and her eyes were bloodshot and puffy. She walked over to the bed, took my hand, and kissed my forehead. "Nikki, are you okay?" I asked. "You don't look okay." I was surprised at the sound of my voice. It was hoarse and weak. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I was so afraid I might lose you. The doctor just told me you're out of danger and should make a full recovery." "How long have I been here?" I asked. "Since Friday." "I know since Friday, but what day is today?" "Tuesday," Nikki said. "I've lost 3 days," I said. "How are you feeling today?" asked Nikki. "I don't. I feel almost nothing right now. My head is clear, and I hope it stays that way. Up until now, I've been like a fog," I said. "What happened to me?" "You don't remember?" asked Nikki. "Only the tiniest bit," I said. Nikki started to say something, but she was interrupted by a man's voice. "Why don't you let me bring Mr. Anderson up to speed?" said the voice. The source of the voice turned out to be Curly. He entered the room just as I asked Nikki what was wrong and sat down next to her. It seemed to me that Curly was still wearing the same brown suit. "Who are you?" I asked. "You don't remember?" he asked. "I remember you asking me questions, but I don't remember your name or what you asked me," I said. "I'm Detective Tony Trenka. I've been assigned this case," he said. "What exactly is this case?" I asked. "Here's what we know so far," said Detective Trenka. "You returned home from Dallas on Friday around noon. When you entered your home, it appears that you were confronted with an impending burglary. We don't yet know how many people were involved, but you were going up the stairs with your luggage when you were shot by a man standing at the top of the stairs. You were shot a total of 3 times in the chest and abdomen. Mrs. Anderson entered the house at approximately 12:25 p.m. and found you lying at the bottom of the stairs. She called 911 as soon as she found you. It appears that the burglar or burglars left immediately after you were shot. They were probably afraid someone might have heard the shots. As it turns out, you were very lucky on 2 counts. First, the perpetrator used a .32 caliber pistol, which is one of the reasons you survived. A .32 doesn't do as much damage as, say, a .38 or a 9mm. The second good fortune was that your wife came home for dinner. If she hadn't found you and called for help, you would have bled to death within minutes. I squeezed Nikki's hand and smiled at her. "What do you say to your wife when you find out she saved your life?" "A simple thank you doesn't seem adequate." I looked at the detective again. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" I asked. "There have been several burglaries in the Sherman Oaks neighborhood recently. They've been breaking into houses during the daytime when the owners were at work," he said. "This is the first incident. We're hoping that, in the panic after the shooting, they may have made a mistake and left us with evidence to help catch them." I believe you were shot because you saw at least one of them, and they assumed you were dead. Otherwise, they probably would have made sure of it. Sir, I would like to ask you again what you remember about what happened on Friday, Detective Trenka said. I told Detective Trenka that all I remember was carrying my bags upstairs, and when I turned around on the landing, I saw someone at the top of the stairs. I told him the guy was large, with dark brown hair, but I couldn't see his face because I was looking at the gun. I told him I didn't remember anything after the first shot. You probably saw his face, Detective Trenka said, but the sight of the gun shocked you, so that's all you remember now, but in time, I think you'll remember what he looks like and hopefully be able to describe him to us. I hope so, I said. Now I'll leave you two alone, Detective Trenka said. I'll check in with you tomorrow to see if you remember anything else. I looked at Nikki and said, Thanks for saving my life, kid. Nikki cried and leaned over and kissed my face. Eric, I don't know what I would do if I lost you, Nikki said. And then a horrible thought hit me. My stomach cramped and a lump rose in my throat that I couldn't swallow. Nikki saw tears streaming from my eyes and asked, What's wrong? Are you in pain? Yeah, but it's not physical pain, I replied. It just occurred to me that if I hadn't come home when I did, you would have walked into the house and you could have been killed. Now I don't feel so bad about being shot. I may have saved your life without even realizing it. Nikki hugged me, and I think we both cried for a few minutes. After that, I started to feel some discomfort from my wounds. Nikki called for a nurse, and she came and gave me something for the pain. I slept for a few hours, and when I woke up, Nikki was sitting by the window reading. As soon as she noticed I was awake, she came over to my bed and kissed me. How are you feeling? She asked. Do you need anything for the pain? No, I'm fine right now, I replied. Before I went to sleep, I wanted to ask you what took you away. What do you mean, what was taken away? What did those bastards take from our house? I asked. What did we lose? I don't know, Nikki said. They left a mess in the family room, but I don't know what was broken or damaged, and I haven't looked at exactly what's missing yet. Why didn't you check to see what was stolen? I asked. I wasn't angry, I was just curious. I haven't been back to the house since it happened. The cops were investigating the whole time and I just couldn't be there. Going into the house and seeing your blood on the floor at the foot of the stairs, I just couldn't stay there. I've been staying with my parents ever since it happened. Of course, I'm sorry about that. I just wasn't thinking, I said. I can understand you not wanting to be there right now. I guess we'll have to hire someone to come in and clean up. We can't do anything until the police clear the house. They say it's a crime scene, and we'll have to wait until they finish their investigation before we can clean up the house. There's no hurry. We can stay with my parents until we get the house cleaned up. The rest of the time Nikki was around, we talked about everything except what had happened on Friday. That night after Nikki left, I thought about how close I was to losing everything, and how close I was to losing Nikki. Might as well have shot her. I tried again to remember anything important about the shooting and remembered something else that seemed important. I wasn't sure of the accuracy of my memory, but every time I tried to picture the shooter, the same thing came up. I hoped that Detective Trenka would stop by the next day, and I could tell him about it. A nurse came in a few minutes later, put something in my IV, and I fell asleep a few minutes later. Next chapter. When I woke up in the morning, I felt much better. I still couldn't move around in the bed and wondered why. Were my injuries more serious than I thought? At 8 o'clock, Nikki came into the room. She kissed me and said, I love you, Eric. I love you too. Eric, I can't stay with you today, Nikki said. School opens in 2 weeks, and I have to attend meetings and get the class ready. I'll stay until the doctor's visit, and then I have to leave. I'll be back around 4 o'clock. That's okay, honey, I said. I'll be fine. I might take a nap while you're gone. Nikki laughed. A nap? She asked. You mean your breaks between sleep and naps? Yeah, all those naps make me tired, I said. I started to laugh, but it made my chest hurt, and when Nikki saw the distressed look on my face, she started to cry. It's okay, Nikki. It just hurts when I laugh, so don't be funny, I said. Nikki tried to smile, but the tears kept rolling down her cheeks. She was just getting a tissue out of her purse when the doctor walked in. How are you feeling today, Mr. Anderson? The doctor asked. I don't know, I replied. I think I'm fine under the circumstances. I'm sorry, I'm sure you've introduced yourself to me before, but I don't remember your name. No need to apologize, he said. It's quite clear. I'm Dr. Berger. Dr. Berger, can you tell me why I can't move my arms or legs and can only turn my head slightly in different directions? I asked. We had to immobilize you so you wouldn't re-injure yourself after the surgery, he replied. How serious are my injuries? Serious, but you're out of danger now. You're very lucky, Dr. Berger said. I know Detective Trenka already told me that. If it had been a bigger caliber gun, I'd probably be dead by now, I said. I immediately regretted it because I saw Nikki's face go completely white. That's true, but you were even luckier because the bullets hit you. Luckily, the bullets didn't hit your liver or kidneys. They didn't really do much damage. How long will Eric have to stay in the hospital? Asked Nikki. I'm hoping he'll be out of bed by this afternoon, and if his things go as well as they have so far, we'll probably send him home on Monday, but Eric will need to take it easy for a few more weeks. I wouldn't recommend going back to work for at least 3 weeks, Dr. Berger said. When the doctor left, Nikki said she couldn't wait to get home. I will hire a nurse to take care of you during the day, and I will be your caregiver at night, she said. After listening to the doctor, Nikki looked more enthusiastic. She kissed me and told me she would be back around 4 o'clock and then left. After Nikki left, I tried to sleep but found I was too restless. Later, a nurse came in and released the restraints that held my arms and legs in place and then removed the foam pillow that held my head in place. I felt great being able to move my arms and legs and turn my head to look out the window. I was watching the pigeons on the window ledge when Detective Trenka appeared. Feeling better today, Mr. Anderson? I think so, yes. It's hard to compare how I feel now to how I felt when I was in a permanent fog. I think it's better now. I just wanted to stop by and see if you remembered anything new that might help you, he said. Something occurred to me last night, but I'm not sure if it's a real memory or not, I said. Let's hear it. Last night I kept revisiting the footage in my head to see if anything new would come up. Each time I remembered everything the same, except I noticed something I may have seen but just didn't commit to memory. I still can't remember the shooter's face, but I think when I looked at the gun it was in his left hand. He was wearing a ring, but it didn't appear to be a wedding ring. It was on his middle finger and was black, probably made of onyx. Does that help? Yes, it helps, Detective Trenka said. Knowing that our shooter is most likely left-handed and wearing an onyx ring helps a lot. It's not as good as the description of his face, but it still helps. Anything else? No, that's all I can remember so far. We were both silent for a moment, and then I noticed that Detective Trenka was still in his brown suit and almost laughed. He noticed me looking at him and lowered his gaze to his clothes. I see you noticed my new suit, he said, smiling at me. I don't usually look this dressed up. Sorry, I didn't mean to stare. It's okay, he said. We had a fire in our house and I lost all my clothes. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Was your house badly damaged? The house wasn't damaged, only my clothes burned, he said. Somehow all my clothes ended up piled up in the driveway and accidentally soaked in gasoline. Then someone dropped a match or cigarette next to the pile. Wow, nothing left but a pair of crispy socks. I think my wife was pretty mad at me that night. He laughed a little and said, I guess we'll work it out, but in the meantime, I'm living in my car and I had to buy this suit at the Salvation Army store. It's the only thing I can wear right now. I felt sorry for him. Detective Trenka seemed like a nice guy, and I hated to think that he was having marital problems. What could he have done that made his wife so angry that she started setting his clothes on fire? I guess in the back of my mind, I guessed it. I wondered how things could be so bad in a marriage that they didn't take steps to fix the problems. Detective Trenka stayed with me for over an hour, but we just talked. I felt like he wanted to tell me something, but for some reason was holding back. Finally, I had to ask. I think there's something you're not telling me, but I think you want to. What is it? I asked. Remember I told you that the shooter thought you were dead? Or he would have made sure you were dead? Asked Detective Trenka. Yes, I remember, said I and waited for him to finish. The shooter knew you weren't dead, but he was sure you were going to die. He wanted you to die, but he wanted it to be slow. That's why the last 2 shots came in the stomach, and not the head, Detective Trenka said. Why? I asked. Why did he do it? Just because he thought I could see him? I don't know, but I plan to find out. After that, Detective Trenka asked me questions about my job and the people I worked with. Only after he left did it occur to me that he might suspect someone I knew was the shooter. Over the next few days, I got stronger, and the nurses had me out of bed and walking the halls. Nikki came to see me every morning and then came back after work and had dinner with me again. She stayed every evening until visiting hours were over. A couple times when I was lonely at night, I would call Nikki at her parents' house, and each time we would talk for over half an hour. Every day when I looked at Nikki, I started to worry. I felt like I was getting stronger every day, but Nikki didn't seem to be doing so well. Her skin color was ashy, and her eyes always seemed puffy and red. I felt like she had lost weight and wasn't sleeping well. She had been through a rough time. The fact that I was lying on the floor with blood pouring out of me, and then not knowing if I was going to live or die, for more than 3 days kept her awake. I was sure that when I was released from the hospital and we got home, she would start to feel better. When I was alone at night and couldn't sleep, all I could think about was Nikki. I remembered how we met my senior year of college. We were introduced at a fraternity party, but not under the best of circumstances. She came to the party as a date for one of my brothers, but he was so drunk he could barely stand on his feet and had to ask me for a ride home. At the time, Nikki made no impression on me or my fraternity brothers. She didn't speak to me until I dropped her off and then only thanked me for the ride. Nicole Saunders, on the other hand, made a big impression on me. She was tall and slender with a very nice body. She had light brown hair and large, very expressive brown eyes. Her nose matched her face perfectly, and her large mouth was capable of creating a 1,000-watt smile. Unfortunately, she didn't give me a single smile that evening as we drove to her sorority house. I saw her smile when she arrived at the party and was immediately jealous of her date. I didn't see her again for 2 weeks. At another party, I ran into her. This time, she smiled at me. "Eric Anderson, right?" she asked. "Yes, and you're Nicole Saunders." "You remembered. I'm impressed. I thought after I was so rude to you when you gave me a ride home, you'd forget about me quickly," she said. I thought for a moment about what great phrases I could have used in that moment, but chose sincerity instead. I said, "I was impressed by how unimpressed you were with me, which made me think of your name." "I wasn't unimpressed," she said. "I was just so mad at Bob. He invites me to a party and then gets so drunk he can't even drive me home. I'm afraid I let my anger affect my attitude toward you. I appreciate the fact that you were sober and gave me a ride without complaining about having to leave the party." I couldn't resist the opportunity. How can I complain about the opportunity to spend time alone with a beautiful girl like you? Nikki laughed and replied, "Thanks, I guess." "Have you forgiven Bob yet?" I asked. "No, and I don't intend to," she replied. "I had only met him the week before, and it was our first and only date. He blew it. I was definitely not impressed with him." "Okay, then how about you go on a date with me?" I asked. "I promise I'll stay sober long enough to get you home." "I'd love to," Nikki said. We went on our first date the next night, and by the end of the next week, we were going out exclusively together. I spent lonely nights in the hospital thinking only of our life together. Nikki and I were married a year after graduating from college. Nikki got a teaching position in the Los Angeles School District, teaching high school English, and I got a job with a company installing computer networks. Nikki and I had been married for 6 years, and the trip to Dallas from which I had just returned was only the second time we had been apart. The first time was a little over a year ago, at the end of last school year. Nikki had volunteered to accompany us on a trip to Germany for the kids in the German club at her school. I had to cancel the trip to Germany to attend an educational technology conference in Denver that same week. Nikki was disappointed but realized I had no choice. We were only separated for a week, but I missed her terribly. I got home from the conference on Thursday night and Nikki returned from her trip to Germany on Saturday. I was lying in my hospital bed thinking about the romantic evening we had spent when Nikki got home. I had prepared a romantic candlelit dinner, and after eating we retired to the bedroom. When Nikki came over to me, I stood up, put my arms around her, and we started dancing to a soft rock CD I was putting on. Afterward, as we were hugging, Nikki said, "I brought you a present from Germany." She went over to her suitcase and started rummaging through it until she found what she was looking for. Nikki came back and handed me the unwrapped box. She stood there, smiling at me, while I tried to guess what might be inside. The box was heavier than I expected, and it confused me. I expected to see a hat or some other light souvenir. "Well, Open it, Nikki said in an excited voice. Inside the box was a liter beer glass. The stein was hand-painted and very beautiful. I couldn't believe it. I've collected a few beer mugs and glasses over the years, but never anything this beautiful, and this one had papers certifying that it was one of 1,000, making it a great collector's item. My collection consisted of 5 beer mugs with the names of beers that are no longer brewed, a pewter mug with a glass bottom that I received as a gift for attending a wedding, and 3 beer mugs I found at garage sales. I hadn't realized Nikki had taken my collection seriously. I can't believe it. It's beautiful. But I'm afraid you spent too much on me, said I. It must be expensive. You deserve it and I can never spend too much on you, Nikki said as she kissed me and climbed onto my bed. Thanks, sweetie, I really like it. I knew you'd like it. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to buy it for you, she said. The funny thing is that, right after saying that, she started crying. I asked her why she was crying and she said, I'm just so happy that I was able to give you this stein. I knew it would be special. I pulled Nikki to me and held her in my arms for a long time. A lump always rose in my throat at the memory of that night. It was one of those happy memories. I had a lot of time to think about how lucky I was to have found Nikki. I knew that without her, I would have been lost. It suddenly occurred to me that I was reviewing my life like an old man on his deathbed. I was young, alive, and had plenty of time to make more great memories with Nikki. It was time to look forward to the future. Next chapter. By Monday, I was more than ready to head home. Nikki had managed to carve out a day off and she arrived at the hospital early to wait for me to be discharged. At 10 o'clock, an orderly drove me to the main entrance and I got into Nikki's car. When we pulled away from the hospital, Nikki said we were going to her parents' house, but I replied that I wanted to go home. The house hasn't been cleaned yet, Nikki said. Detective Trenka gave me the name of a company that does the kind of cleaning we need. I called them on Friday and arranged for them to come today. I want to be there when they come to clean and I want to see what was taken so we can file an insurance claim, I said. On the way home, Nikki didn't say a word. I think she was afraid of how I would react to the mess that awaited us. Before we pulled up to the house, I told Nikki that it would be easier for me to get into the house through the front door than to mess around with the stairs in the garage. Nikki parked the car in front of the garage door and went around to help me out. Nikki held my hand as we slowly walked to the front door. I was starting to get nervous about what was waiting for us at the house, and I could see that Nikki was worried too. Nikki unlocked the door and I walked in first. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I was struck by a metallic smell, similar to copper. Then I saw him. At the foot of the stairs lay my small suitcase and bag. Both were drenched in blood. There was also a large puddle of caked blood on the wooden floor next to my bags. I remembered that the doctor had said I had lost about 2 pints of blood, but it felt like a lot more. When Nikki came into the house, she stood next to me and looked at the dark red puddle. Suddenly, she covered her mouth with her hand and ran to the bathroom. I could hear her vomiting into the toilet bowl. Apparently, the sight of blood and the smell was too much for her. I wanted to go over to her and help her, but I didn't think my stomach was strong enough for me to provide any assistance. I waited by the bathroom until Nikki stopped throwing up. After she washed her face, I led her from the bathroom through the kitchen and into the family room. I sat down with her on the couch and tried to calm her down. Putting my arm around Nikki, I looked around the room. There were books and a few knickknacks scattered all over the floor. I looked at my collection of beer mugs and glasses. They were all on their shelves except for the one Nikki had brought me from Germany. I wondered if it had been stolen when Nikki interrupted my thoughts. I'm sorry, Eric. I wanted to be strong for you, but seeing all that blood made me remember everything. I'm okay now, Nikki said. Do you want a glass of water? I asked. No, I'm fine, she said. And besides, I have to take care of you. I think we should put you to bed and then I'll make you some lunch and bring it upstairs. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. I don't think I'm in any condition to go up those stairs right now, and I don't think you need to see the mess at the bottom of the stairs again. I have an idea. Why don't you make me a sandwich for lunch and leave it in the fridge and then come back to work? I can't leave you here alone. Look, I think you'll feel a lot better if you don't have to be here when they come to clean up the blood in the hallway. I'll be fine. I'll lie down on the couch and rest, and when I get hungry, I can get a sandwich, I said. I don't know. I just don't feel like leaving you alone. I'll be fine, I said. School starts next week, and I know you still have a lot to do to get ready for the new school year. I'll be on my best behavior and call you if I have any problems. When you get home, we'll start cleaning up this mess, I said. That's when I saw the glass. It was broken into small pieces on the hearth of the fireplace. Nikki saw what I was looking at and started crying. It's all right, Nikki, I said. The glass can be replaced. Now make me a sandwich and get out of here. Are you sure about that? Absolutely. All right then, I'll go to work, she said. I think you're right. I'd feel better if I left here until the lobby's cleaned up. I can't look at it without feeling nauseous. By the time you get home, it'll be gone, I said. Nikki did as I suggested, made a sandwich for me and put it in the fridge. Then she left for work. The cleaners showed up about an hour later while I was eating my sandwich. I went to the door and let them into the lobby. The man who appeared to be in charge looked at the pool of blood on the floor. Is that all of it, or are there more places that need to be cleaned up? He asked me. That should be the only place, but you can check the stairs and the wall on the landing to see if there was any splatter, I replied. It shouldn't take more than an hour to clean and deodorize. Whose blood is that? Mine. Wow, looks like at least 2 pints, he said. You're lucky to be alive. How did you determine it was 2 pints? I asked. I've had a lot of experience cleaning up crime scenes, and after a while you just know, he said. Crime scene. This was my house. It was hard to think of it as a crime scene, and the cleaners got to work and I went back into the kitchen to finish my sandwich. Finished eating, I put my plate in the sink and walked back into the family room. I was about to sit down when I suddenly thought I should check the safe to see if any burglars had broken in. In our house, there was a cabinet built into the wall above the fireplace. It was designed to house a television. We had an entertainment center along the adjacent wall, so I used the space above the fireplace for my safe. The safe had a few things in it: insurance policies, legal documents, savings bonds, and a few stock certificates. Also in the safe was about $100 in cash. The cabinet door was partially open, and I assumed that the burglars must have seen the safe, but when I opened the door, the safe was intact. There was no damage on the outside of the safe, so it didn't look like anyone had tried to break into it, and it didn't look like anyone had even tried to move it. I opened the safe to check the contents and found that nothing was missing. That pleased me. I locked the safe again and closed the closet doors. For a moment, I thought about cleaning up the broken and scattered things around the room, but realized I didn't have the energy and laid down on the couch to rest. By the time Nikki returned from work, the foyer was spotlessly clean. The copper smell had been replaced by the scent of cinnamon. I thought it was an odd smell for a deodorizer, but I even liked it. I thought sending Nikki to work that day was a good idea, but when she got home, I wasn't so sure anymore. She looked very stressed and anxious. It took 20 minutes and a large glass of whiskey for her to relax. When I asked her why she was so tense, she cried, "I just want it all to go away," she said. "I don't want to think about it anymore." "I'm sure the police will catch these guys soon," I said. But that didn't seem to calm Nikki down much. We didn't get to work cleaning up like I'd planned. Nikki just wanted to sit next to me on the couch all night. That night, Nikki and I slept together for the first time in 2 weeks, but nothing more. I wasn't physically ready for it, and Nikki seemed afraid to touch me. I wasn't sleeping well. I kept waking up thinking I heard someone in the house, and every time I woke up to find Nikki awake too. Next chapter. Tuesday went better. I felt a little stronger and could walk down the stairs on my own. I had breakfast with Nikki and then cleaned the kitchen while Nikki got ready for work. Later that morning, Detective Trenka stopped by to see how I was doing and to get a list of everything stolen. While we talked, I put the coffee brewing. "Did you make a list of what was missing?" asked Detective Trenka. "No, I haven't, because nothing seems to be missing," I said. "Really?" Detective Trenka said with irony in his voice. "You've probably already thought about it, Detective, but I think there must have been at least 2 people involved," I said. Detective Trenka seemed amused by this. "Why don't we be less formal? Call me Tony, and if you don't mind, I'll call you Eric." "I don't mind," I said. "Okay, Eric, then let me hear your theory," Tony said. "Well, we know someone was upstairs because he was the one who shot me. The fact that the downstairs was a mess indicates that someone searched the first floor, but nothing was missing. Makes me think that whoever searched the first floor left when they heard the shots or shortly afterward. Otherwise, why didn't they take the TV, CD player, or DVD player? The safe is what really piqued my curiosity. Whoever searched the first floor obviously saw the safe, so why didn't they try to open it or carry it away to open it elsewhere? Isn't a safe the sort of thing a burglar would look for? I asked. Very well. I've been trying to find that out myself. You may be right about the gunshots scaring them off, said Tony. Do you think there's another explanation? I asked. I just keep my options open. Sometimes if you try too hard to make the facts fit your conclusions, you can come up with a wrong answer, Tony said and smiled at me. I waited to see if Tony would tell me what he was thinking, but apparently he didn't want me to get so involved in his investigation. By then the coffee was finished and I asked Tony if he had time for a cup. I'd love to, he replied. I poured 2 cups, took them into the family room, and we sat down, me on the couch and Tony in the chair across from me. I noticed that he was looking around the room and looking at the mess left by the burglars. I guess I'll have to start cleaning up the place after you leave, I said. I've seen a lot more destruction caused by burglars, but I've also seen cases where nothing was in place but stolen items, Tony said. And then a question popped into my head that I didn't want to ask, but knew I should. I guess now the guy who shot me knows I survived. Do you think there's any chance he'll come back and try to finish the job? I asked. There's always that chance, but I think it's unlikely. He knows you're alive, but he also knows you couldn't describe him. If he comes after you now, it only increases the likelihood that he'll be caught. Are you worried? Not so much for myself, but for Nikki's safety. I know she didn't sleep well last night, and I think it's because she's worried they might come back, I said. I can increase patrols in your neighborhood for a while if that would help. Yeah, thanks. I took a sip of coffee and decided to change the subject. I see you're wearing a new suit today. How are things going on the home front? I asked. Much better, thank you. My wife has forgiven me for my stupidity, Tony said. Another woman? Almost, Tony said. Tracy caught me with another woman at a party. I had too much to drink and this woman flirted with me a lot. I got a little carried away. Luckily, Tracy caught me before I went too far. As pissed as she was for catching me for backstabbing, I shudder to think what she would have done if she had caught me doing horizontal mambo with this woman. The only thing that saved my ass is that Tracy knows I've never done anything like that before. I was starting to feel like Tony and I were becoming friends. Maybe I'm misjudging the situation, but I definitely felt comfortable talking to him and he seemed relaxed around me. It's always nice to make new friends. Tony stayed for a second cup of coffee and then had to leave when he got a call from police dispatch. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. There really wasn't much to clean, but I had to move slowly as I was still very weak. The saddest part of this cleaning was picking up the shards of the beer glass that Nikki had bought me in Germany. There were many things scattered around the room, but the glass was the only broken item. It seemed like someone had broken it just to mess with it. Of the 13 mugs and glasses on the shelf, why was this particular one broken? It was the most precious, and the only one that had significant sentimental value to me. I was starting to get angry, but then I remembered that I had been shot 3 times too. I decided to try to put the situation in perspective. When the cleaning on the first floor was done, I went upstairs. I found it a little curious that there was nothing extra on the second floor. Nikki didn't have a lot of expensive jewelry, but everything she had was in a case on her dresser. Nothing was missing. This led me to the conclusion that I must have entered the house right after the guy who shot me went upstairs, not giving him time to start looking for valuables. It was beginning to look like, even though I had been shot, I had prevented the burglars from stealing anything from the house. When Nikki came home from work that evening, there was no longer any trace of what had been going on in the house just a week and a half ago. When Nikki saw that I had cleaned the house, she scolded me. "You know you should still take it easy," she said. I couldn't sit and look at that mess anymore, I said. Besides, I've been feeling pretty good all day. Well, you don't look so good now, she said. You're very pale. You're just sitting here while I make dinner. If you get up again, I'll call Dr. Berger and tell him to put you back in the hospital. Nikki smiled as she said this. Okay, I'll be a good boy, I said. Please don't send me back to the hospital. Nikki started laughing at me. Just sit back while I make you dinner, she said. After dinner, Nikki carried me to bed and changed my bandages. We were both relieved that there was no bleeding or discharge from the wounds. After applying fresh bandages, Nikki gave me a very gentle massage. I think I went a little overboard that day. I fell asleep before Nikki finished the massage. Next chapter. Wednesday morning, I got up and had breakfast with Nikki. There's an open house for new students at school today, Nikki said. I can probably get excused if you'd rather I stay home. How late are you coming? I asked. It starts at 7 o'clock and ends at 8:30. I have to be home no later than 9. I'll come home from school at 4, make dinner, and change your bandages before I go to the open house. I'll need to leave here at 6:30, Nikki said. I think you should go, I said. We need to carry on with our normal lives as much as possible. As Nikki prepared to leave for work, I could see that something was bothering her. It was obvious to me that Nikki was still worried about me. When she came over to kiss me before she left for work, she hugged me a little longer and a little tighter than usual. I love you, she whispered in my ear. I love you too. After Nikki left, the house got too quiet. I tried to think of something to occupy myself with, but the only ideas that came to mind were ideas that would be too heavy for me in the state I was in. I had overexerted myself the day before and promised Nikki and myself that I would take it easy that day. I decided to load up the CD player and put it on low volume. I then pulled out the Dean Koontz book I had recently bought but hadn't started yet and sat down to read. I read until Nikki got home, interrupted only for lunchtime. Nikki was pleased that I hadn't exerted myself all day, but said I should have put the book down for a couple hours and taken a nap. Nikki changed my bandages, made dinner, and was ready to leave for the middle school open house at 6:30. When she left, I went to the family room to watch TV. Unfortunately, the TV was only showing reruns of summer shows, so I turned off the TV and sat down. With nothing to occupy my thoughts, I started thinking about the burglary and the shooting again. Something was starting to bother me about the whole story. If this was the burglary crew that Tony thought was responsible, I couldn't understand how they could have gotten away with nothing. It still wasn't clear how they had gotten into the house in the first place, and that worried me greatly. This unsettling feeling made me get up and check the safe once more. Perhaps there was something missing in the safe that I hadn't noticed on my first inspection. Opening the safe, I went through all my folders and made sure nothing was missing, but I found that I had overlooked something on my first inspection. I stared at the two $300 American Airlines vouchers, and my legs went stiff from realizing what they meant. I put them back in the safe and then sat down on the couch to think through the situation with the new information in mind. When I couldn't come to any other conclusion, I yelled loudly, "It can't be, damn it! This can't be happening! Damn it, Nikki! What have you done?" Part 2. The pain I felt in my chest was worse than my wounds could have caused. I was beginning to doubt that Nikki had just dealt me the final blow. Everything still wasn't clear, so I knew I had to take things slowly so I wouldn't make a big mistake. I analyzed every possible scenario and kept coming back to one conclusion. Nikki was already in the house when I was shot. She had to have been upstairs with the shooter when I entered the house. Now I was going to have to figure out what that meant and what I was going to do about it. I was very angry and knew that when Nikki got home, the confrontation would be horrible. I tried to plan what I would say to her, but my anger was such that I knew I wouldn't be able to contain it, and that scared me. The thought of Nikki alone upstairs with another man was driving me crazy. I finally decided that I couldn't talk to her because I was afraid I might hurt her. And when I got all the facts in the right order, I realized it was time to talk to Tony. But before I called him, I needed to talk to someone else. Jim Culkin and I had grown up together in Glendale. We'd been best friends for as long as I could remember. Jim was best man at my wedding, and I was best man at his. I hadn't seen much of Jim the last couple years. Jim still lived in Glendale, and Nikki and I lived in Sherman Oaks, and it seemed like too much of an effort to see each other as often as we would have liked. It was Jim who I called that evening. "Hello, Jim." "Eric?" "Yeah, how are you?" "I'm fine, how are you?" he asked. "Not too good right now. I have a problem I'm going to need your help with," I said. "You know you can count on me," Jim said. "After all, what are friends for?" "I appreciate that, but in this case I need you, not because you're a friend, but because you're a lawyer." "What's the problem?" I told Jim everything. I told him about the shooting, the apparent burglary, and the fact that nothing was taken. Then I told him about the airline vouchers and what they meant, and then I told him what I wanted him to do for me. You can count on me, Jim said. What time do you want me to come in? No. Why don't you plan to be here at 9 o'clock? I said. Okay, then I'll be at your house at 9 o'clock. Thank you, Jim. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Like I said, what are friends for? Said Jim. As soon as I hung up the phone after talking to Jim, I called Tony on his cell phone. Tony, this is Eric Anderson. Eric, I'm glad you called. I have some news for you, he said. Do you have a chance to come here tonight at 9 o'clock? I have something important to tell you about this case, I said. You haven't been playing detective, have you? No, but I've come across something that might shed some light on the case. I'm not happy about it, but I have to talk to you about it, I said. Now I'm curious. I'll be there at 9, Tony said. When I got off the phone with Tony, it was 7:45. It was still an hour and 15 minutes before Jim and Tony arrived. I hoped Nikki would get home before they arrived so I wouldn't go into the house and catch them there. I spent the next hour making a plan of action. I grabbed a notepad and pencil and sat at the kitchen table making notes. I was still sitting there when Nikki walked into the house at 8:50. What are you writing? She asked. Just making some notes for something I need to do later, I replied. What kind of things? It's not important right now, I said. We have guests coming over in a few minutes. We have? Who? Jim Culkin and Tony Trenka, I said. We haven't seen Jim in a while, Nikki said. Why did he come? I told him about the shoot and he came to see if he could help, I said. It'll be nice to see him again, but how can he help? Asked Nikki. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Why did Detective Trenka come? She asked. He said he had some news on the case, I replied. Nikki's face reflected concern. Did they catch the robber who shot at you? I don't know, I said. We'll have to wait until he catches her to find out. Nikki went upstairs to change, and I sat down and waited for the guests to arrive. I hoped they would come soon. I found it very hard to hide my anger. The first to arrive, at 9 o'clock, was Jim. As he walked in, I saw him looking me over, trying to see what condition I was in. We were still standing in the foyer when Nikki came down the stairs and hugged Jim. It's good to see you again, Jim, Nikki said as she kissed his cheek. No sooner had our conversation gotten any further than the doorbell rang. I opened the door and invited Tony in. After I introduced myself, Tony looked at me as if to ask what Jim was doing there. For now, let's just say that Jim is an interested observer, I said. Tony accepted my explanation and we all headed into the family room to sit down. I had already made coffee and asked Nikki if she would help serve the guests. Once we were all seated with our coffee, I turned to Tony. Tony, on the phone you said you had some news for us, I said. Yes. I wanted to tell you that the gang of robbers we suspected in your shooting have been arrested. They were caught while robbing a house 10 blocks from here this afternoon, Tony said. And I could tell by the look on Tony's face that he had something else to say, and probably not good news. Tony, I got the impression that you don't think these are the guys who shot at me. How do you know that? Asked Tony. Like I told you on the phone, I've made some progress on this case myself, I said. Nikki grabbed my arm and said, What? Do you know who shot you? No, I don't know who shot me, but I think I can help Tony find out who did, I said. I looked at Jim and he was just sitting there watching all of us. I turned to Tony and he was staring at me. Okay, Eric, you have the floor, Tony said. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. You're going to have to be patient with me. I need you to understand how this all happened for it to make sense. Take your time. I'll save my questions for later, Tony said. This came to me tonight. I was rechecking the contents of my safe when I came across 2 American airline vouchers for $300. Ever since I woke up in the hospital, I've been trying to remember everything that happened from the moment I walked into the house and up the stairs to the moment I was shot. I was hoping I would remember what the shooter looked like, or that something else would occur to me, but the only thing I could remember was that the shooter held a gun in his left hand and was wearing an onyx ring. When I found the travel vouchers, I realized that I needed to go back even further to start piecing things together. One thing that was clear to me, but that I didn't want to think about, was that according to my original plans for coming home from Dallas, I was supposed to arrive at the Los Angeles airport at 5:30 Friday night. Nikki was going to pick me up at the airport, and we were going to stop for dinner on the way home. But my plans changed. By Thursday, my project was a little ahead of schedule, and it turned out that if we worked late on Thursday, we could finish the project and get home earlier on Friday. I discussed it with my team and the client, and we all agreed to stay late on Thursday and finish the project. That night, we broke for dinner at 5 and I called the airline and asked if I could change my flight to an earlier flight in the morning. The girl at American said they had a 7:45 a.m. flight that would get me to LAX at 8:54 a.m. I asked her to book that flight. We finished work at 11:30 Thursday night. Friday morning, I was at the airport at 6:15 a.m. I grabbed a cup of coffee, a muffin, and a newspaper, and waited at my gate for the flight attendants to open the counter. Once they opened, I walked over to the counter to get my seat and do another thing I always do when I'm not on a tight schedule. I asked the flight attendant if the flight was full. She replied that it was, and I asked if they needed volunteers for a later flight. She replied that they did, so I handed her my ticket and told her I was a volunteer. In exchange for my ticket, American Airlines gave me a $300 voucher for future trips and gave me a seat on a flight that was scheduled for 9:15 a.m. That flight was also overbooked, so I received a second $300 voucher and was put on a 10:05 a.m. flight. That flight was not crowded, and I arrived at the Los Angeles airport at 11:15 a.m. Within 20 minutes, I had packed my bags and caught a cab. The traffic on the freeways was heavy that morning, so we were able to get from the airport to the house very quickly. When I got into the house, I set the bags down in the hallway just as the grandfather clock in the living room struck 1/4 past the hour. I remember looking at the clock and seeing that it was 12:15. Until I found those vouchers, I couldn't remember what I was doing when I first entered the house. Now I remembered. After putting the bags in the hallway, I walked to the family room, opened the safe, and put the 2 vouchers in it. I locked the safe, then went back to the foyer, picked up my bags, and headed upstairs. We all know what happened next. Nikki, who hadn't let go of my hand since we sat down at the table, squeezed it tighter when I reminded her of what had happened on the stairs. Say, man, as soon as I remembered what I did when I entered the house, I realized there were no burglars downstairs. As you can see, there is no place for someone to hide. If someone had been in this room, I would have seen them. I would have also seen the mess they made, but there was none. At that point, the whole timeline became a problem. I entered the house at 12:15. There were no signs of a robbery in progress on the first floor. By the time I got upstairs, at least 2 more minutes had passed, and by the time I was shot, it was 12:17. 8 minutes later, at 12:25, Nikki finds me and calls 911. That meant that in the 8 minutes between the time I was shot and when Nikki called 911, the burglars had decided to scatter things on the first floor to make it look like a break-in, but hadn't stolen anything. Nothing made sense to me. If the burglars were in the house but hadn't taken anything yet and hadn't even started searching the first floor when one of them shot me, why would they scatter things in the family room to make it look like a break-in? Why don't they just leave to make it look like a straight-up murder? Why would they want to draw attention to themselves? It was very well thought out, Tony said. I can see that you're starting to think the same way I am. So who do you think shot you and why? I still don't know who shot me or why, but I think I know someone who does, I said. I believe there were 2 people upstairs that day. One of them shot at me. The other sat with me and watched me bleed for 8 minutes before calling 911. During that time, the shooter trashed the family room to make it look like I had entered the house during a robbery. Nikki had pulled away from me and was now crying, curled up in a fecal ball in the corner of the couch. I think Nikki can tell you who shot me and why, I said. Tony wasn't the least bit surprised. I'm sorry, Eric. I was starting to believe it happened too, he said. I'm going to have to take her in for questioning. Tony, can we have a few minutes? I asked. I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. I don't think you should talk to Nikki until we get this sorted out. Not for me. I want Nikki to talk to Jim, I said. He's her lawyer. So, no. You arranged for your wife to be here with her lawyer even though she's probably involved in your shooting? Asked Tony. I don't know what was going on between Nikki and the man who shot me, but I can't believe she could have intentionally provoked it, I said. I just want to make sure she has great legal advice from someone she trusts. If you let Jim talk to Nikki for a few minutes, I think she'll cooperate with you and answer any questions you have. Nikki was still lying curled up on the couch and didn't say a word. I agree with you, Tony said. She can talk to Jim, and then I'll give her an opportunity to come to the station voluntarily and answer questions. If she refuses to come, we'll issue an arrest warrant. There's nothing more I can do. Jim, Tony, and I stood up together and walked toward the door. I shook Tony's hand and thanked him for allowing Nikki to come voluntarily. Jim then shook Tony's hand. I'll have her at the station within the hour, Jim said. I know her well. I think she'll want to cooperate. I hope you're right, Tony said, turning to leave the house. As the door closed, Jim turned to me and said, I'm going to go talk to her. You do realize that anything Nikki tells me will be confidential, and I can't discuss it with you. I understand, I said. I asked you to do this because I know Nikki would feel more comfortable with you representing her rather than someone she doesn't know. I would never use our friendship to get you to betray your client's trust, and I know you wouldn't do that even if I asked you to. I knew that under normal circumstances you'd realize that, Jim said. But these aren't normal circumstances. Is there anything you'd like me to tell Nikki? If the police let her leave after the interrogation, she'll have to go to her parents, I said. I still love her, but I can't be with her right now. Tell her I'll call her father and tell him what's going on. I'm sure he'll come to the police station to be with her. You look like you want to say something else, Jim said. What exactly? I just don't know how this is going to turn out, but it's not good for my marriage, I said. I want you to do what you can for Nikki in this case, but I would ask that you not represent her in the divorce proceedings. I know you can't represent me, it would be a conflict of interest, and I certainly don't want my best friend sitting next to my wife during divorce proceedings. If she asks, just refer her to another attorney. No problem, he said. I'd rather not be involved in divorce proceedings between you and Nikki. Let me talk to her now. I think it's best if you don't talk to Nikki again until things are resolved. If you need to say anything to her, you can call me. Agreed? I told Jim that I agreed, but that I would communicate with Nikki through her parents if necessary. I then went upstairs to our bedroom while Jim went to the family room to talk to Nikki. 20 minutes later, Jim called me down the stairs and I went down to see what he wanted. Eric, Nikki would like to go upstairs and gather some clothes to take with her. I'll go to my office and have her go upstairs and pack, I said. I wanted to ask if Nikki had agreed to cooperate with the police investigation, but I knew I couldn't. Jim would tell me everything he could, and otherwise, I would just have to wait and see what happened. While Nikki packed upstairs, I sat at my desk and tried to make sense of everything that had happened that day. There had never been any sign of trouble in our marriage, or had I just not noticed it? The idea that Nikki could have been in our room with another man just didn't make sense, but the evidence made me believe just that. Tony had been thinking the same thing before it even crossed my mind. Was Nikki really having an affair? Was her lover shooting at me? Tony told me that the shooter definitely wanted me dead, but wanted me to die slowly. Why? I wonder if I find out who shot me. Would it make more sense? The hardest thing for me to understand is why Nikki didn't call 911 right away. It took 8 minutes before she called. Was she hoping I would die? Did she really hate me that much? I refused to believe it. Nikki had always been a loving wife. After the shooting, she had done everything she could to show me how much she loved me. I allowed that guilt might have something to do with it, but maybe it was about something darker. Was she trying to convince me that she couldn't have had anything to do with me being shot? No, what scared me the most was that I might never know the whole truth about what had happened. Next chapter. When I heard footsteps approaching my office door, I quickly wiped the tears from my eyes and turned as the door opened. Jim poked his head through the door. Eric, we were just leaving. You said you were going to call Nikki's dad, right? I'll call him in a few minutes. Thanks, Jim. I sat down at my desk and waited for the front door to close. I felt like I was about to snap, but I knew I had to hold on a little longer. I still had to call Nikki's father, and I wanted to make sure I caught him before he went to bed. No one wants to get the kind of news I was about to break, and if he was already in bed when I called, it would only make things worse. George? Oh, Eric. How are you, son? Said Nikki's father. Condition is improving, I said. I'm afraid I have something disturbing to report to you. There was silence in the receiver for a moment, and then, what is it, Eric? Nikki is at the Sherman Oaks police station. She's being questioned about her involvement in my shooting, I said. Oh my God. You can't be serious, he said. You can't believe Nikki could have anything to do with this. Look, George, I know it's a shock. For me too, I said. I can't tell you any more than I can right now. I just wanted to ask you to go down to the police station and be there for her. She's going to have to stay with you and Mary for a while. Eric, I don't know what to say. This has to be some kind of mistake. Nikki loves you. I can't believe it. I'm so sorry, George. I know this is hard to accept, I said. Are you going to the station? Of course. What are you going to do about Eric? He asked. I don't know yet. Please don't do anything rash. Wait until we find out what really happened before you make any long-term decisions, he said. I will, George. Thank you. Hanging up the phone, I put my head on the table and tried to push all thoughts out of my head. This was going to be the hardest time since this whole thing started. I hadn't had time to think about what it all meant before. From the moment I found the travel vouchers in the safe, my thoughts were occupied with all the things I had to do. I had to call Jim and explain everything to him. I had to contact Tony and ask him to come to our house. I had to think about how to explain everything to Tony so he would understand. After that, I needed to talk to Nikki's father. Now that all that was done, I was left alone to reflect on what had been done to me and decide what to do about it. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get one thought out of my head. Nikki had a lover, and he shot me. He wanted me dead so Nikki would stay with him. Did he plan to kill me, or did he just shoot me because I showed up at the wrong time? How long had their affair lasted? I realized that with these thoughts swirling around in my head, I wouldn't be able to sleep, so I took one of the pain pills the doctor had prescribed and lay in bed. The strong painkiller put me to sleep in less than 10 minutes. When I got up on Thursday, I felt lost. How was I going to live without Nikki? I was very angry with her, but at the same time, I missed her terribly. I tried to think about what I was going to do, but my mind kept coming back to thoughts of Nikki's betrayal. I knew I was going to have to get over all of this, but it wasn't going to be easy. The phone rang a few times that morning, but I let the answering machine take the calls. A few calls were from the school. They were wondering where Nikki was. Nikki's mom called, wanting to talk to me, but I wasn't ready for that conversation. There were several calls that left no messages. I wondered if all these calls could have been from Nikki's lover. Finally, at 5 o'clock, Tony called. Hearing his voice, I picked up the phone. Tony, I'm here. Hey, Eric, how are you holding up? He asked. Not too good? Do you have any scotch at home? Asked Tony. Yeah, I have a bottle. Why? I'd like to come over for a drink, he said. Sure, come on in. I could use the company, I said. An hour later, Tony was sitting in the chair across from me, swirling ice in a glass of scotch. Sorry, I can't tell you more at the moment, said Tony. He had just finished telling me that Nikki had cooperated and answered all the questions she had been asked. He said she was at the station for 2 hours, and then they let her go home with her father. Tony said they now know who shot me, but he can't tell me until he is arrested. Apparently, whoever shot me was out of state for a meeting and was supposed to be back on Sunday. They didn't want him to know they were looking for him. Tony said they could have asked the police in Colorado, where he was at the meeting, to arrest him, but then they would have had to go through the extradition process, which could have delayed the case. Tony said the assistant district attorney assigned to the case decided to wait until Sunday so they could pick up the suspect from his home. I was in favor of Denver police picking him up. I would rather he sit behind bars and wait for extradition than risk him finding out we're looking for him. He might disappear if he found out we were after him, Tony said, but I was against it. I felt some relief that they knew who had shot me, but the fact that they'd gotten that information from Nikki only confirmed what I'd hoped wasn't true. Nikki was involved. Tony told me that he didn't know what Nikki told the investigator because he wasn't there for her during the interview. He said that even if he had been there, he couldn't discuss it with me. He said the investigation was ongoing and he wouldn't be able to tell me any more than he already had. I took a sip of whiskey and looked up at the slowly rotating fan on the ceiling. I can't figure out how I feel about all this. I guess I'm just confused about it all, I said. That's understandable. Things will be a lot clearer next week, Tony said. You know what I'd do if I were you? I'd get the hell out of Dodge, he said. What, get out of town and go where? I asked. To the beach, to Vegas, to Hawaii. Just get away from here for a while. A change of scenery will do you good, he said. I thought about it for a minute and said, You're probably right. There's nothing keeping me here right now. Maybe lying on a beach somewhere would be just what I need. So, yeah. I'll call you if anything happens that you need to know about, Tony said. I think I will. I don't know where yet. but I'll go somewhere. Thanks for the offer, though. You'll call me if something happens, right? I said I'd call, didn't I? Said Tony. Tony stayed another hour and just chatted with me. When he first came in, I thought he was trying to get information from me, but it turned out he just wanted to talk. Before he left, he took my cell phone number and asked me to let him know where I was going and where I was staying. After Tony left, I wondered where I would go to get away for a while. Hawaii sounded wonderful, but in my condition, I didn't feel like I could handle a long flight. All the places I could think of were either too far away or not far enough away to suit me. By the time I finally went to bed, I still hadn't made any decisions. On Friday morning, I called my office to see what was going on in my absence. I was both relieved and disappointed to learn that they were functioning just fine without me. I talked to my boss, Charlie Carson, about when I could return to work, and he told me not to worry about it. Whenever you're ready, your job will be waiting for you, Charlie said. How is Nikki coping with all this? No, she's doing as well as could be expected under the circumstances, I said. I didn't tell him that she'd been involved in the shooting. At the time, it seemed to me that the less people knew about it, the better. I know how hard it is for you to just sit idle, Charlie said. What are you going to do to keep yourself busy? I've decided to get out of town for a couple of weeks, I said. Where are you going to go? I haven't decided yet. I can't go far away. I can't sit still for more than a couple hours, so no long car or plane rides, said I. How about Vegas? Suggested Charlie. I don't know, I said. I've thought about it, but I don't think I want to stay in one of those huge hotels. I need to be able to get away by myself. It would be nice if I could have some privacy and still have access to a casino and great restaurants. I may have a solution for you, Charlie said. I have a small house in Vegas, a few miles west of the Strip. I bought it a few years ago before real estate prices there skyrocketed. You're welcome to use it. That's very generous of you, but I'm not sure. Charlie interrupted me. Actually, you'd be doing me a favor. We haven't been there in almost 3 months. I'd appreciate it if you'd spend some time there and check on things. Make sure there are no water leaks and that the air conditioning is working. Since you brought it up like that, I think I can do that. It's just a short flight and a cab ride. I'll get on it, I said. Thanks. Okay, I need you to do a couple things while you're there, he said. Sure, whatever you need. There's an old Honda Civic in the garage. You might have to put the battery on the charger I have in the garage, but I'd like you to use it while you're there and then fill the gas tank before you leave. Also, before you get home, I want you to buy a case of Heineken and put it in the refrigerator. We're going there next month, and it would be nice to have a cold beer waiting for us. I can do that. Maybe I'll even get some for myself. Thanks, Charlie, I said. I'm glad it works for you, Charlie said. I'll drop the key off at your house on my way home from work tonight. I decided I was going to fly to Vegas in the morning, so I called to book my tickets. Later that afternoon, I called Nikki's parents' house. Hello. Hi, Mary, it's Eric. Eric, did you want to talk to Nikki? Said Mary. No, I can't talk to her right now, I said. Please, she really needs to talk to you. I'm sorry, I just can't deal with this right now. I just called to tell you I'm going out of town for a while, I said. I'll be leaving in the morning, so tell Nikki that if she wants to stop by our house for clothes or anything else, she can stop by anytime after 10 tomorrow morning. I'll tell her, Eric, but can't you talk to her yourself? Pleaded Mary. Mary, I just can't. I'm too angry and hurt to communicate with her right now. I'm sorry, I said. I understand. I hope you can work things out, Mary said. I don't know why, but Mary's last remark pissed me off. Handle it? For God's sake, Mary, her lover shot me. That leaves no chance of forgiveness. Before Nikki's mother could utter another word, I disconnected. After that phone call, I felt completely uncomfortable. I felt ashamed that I had treated Mary so badly, and I admitted to myself that I wished things could get better. But I didn't see how they could. I spent the rest of the day thinking about my relationship with Nikki, trying to think of any little thing that might indicate that there was a problem brewing in our marriage. But there was nothing. I couldn't remember a single thing Nikki had done that would make me think she was cheating on me, or that there was some other problem in our marriage. On the contrary, I could only remember things she did to show her love for me. I couldn't remember a single time when I wasn't sure that Nikki loved me as much as I loved her. How all this could have happened remained a big mystery to me. I hoped that my time in Las Vegas would help me gain some clarity. At 6:30 that evening, Charlie stopped by our house and gave me the keys and directions to his house in Las Vegas. I think you and Nikki are going to like this house, Charlie said. Nikki won't come with me, I said, and immediately wished she hadn't. She's not coming? Why? Asked Charlie. She can't go, was the first thing I could think of to say. Classes start on Monday, so she'll have to stay in town. Charlie, do me another favor. Don't tell anyone where I'm... No one. I don't want to be disturbed. I realized that Charlie understood what I was saying. Don't worry. No one will know where you are unless you tell them yourself, Charlie said. After Charlie left, I called Tony and told him I was going to Vegas. What hotel are you staying at? He asked. I won't be staying in a hotel. I'll be staying at a friend's house, I said. Good. Who else knows where you're staying? He asked. Only my boss, and that's only because it's his house. Why? I just don't want anyone to know where you are until we have a suspect in custody. I'm still not thrilled with the ADA's decision to wait until this guy gets home to arrest him. There are too many things that could go wrong. I figure the fewer people who know where you are, the better. In that case, I'm glad I asked my boss not to tell anyone where I was going, I said. Good job, Tony said. Did you talk to your wife? No, I called her mother this morning to tell her I was going away for a while. She tried to get me to talk to Nikki, but I refused. Good. I know it's hard, but it's best if you don't talk to her until we get this mess sorted out, Tony said. I have your cell number, so if I need to contact you, I can do it. Just make sure you have your cell phone with you. Jesus, you're being a mother hen, aren't you? Remember what I told you. This guy didn't just shoot you in a panic. He wanted you dead, and he wanted it slow and painful. I think if he had another chance, he would have killed you, Tony said. I could be wrong, but 15 years as a cop tells me I'm right. There's no sense in taking any chances. I'll heed your warning and be careful, I said. Anything else you want to tell me? Yes. The ADA plans to speak to your wife again tomorrow. Do you have anything we could ask her that might shed some light on this case? He asked. Tony, I've been thinking about this all day and couldn't come up with anything. Nikki has never done anything that would make me the slightest bit suspicious. I can't think of anything that might help your investigation. I'd like to help. I want answers as much as you do, I said. I'm sure you do, he said. When are you leaving? I have a 9-hour flight out of Burbank. Well, enjoy your... I don't know what to call it. Anyway, try to relax and build up your strength. Some of the most painful parts of this case are yet to come, and you need to be strong to handle them, Tony said. Tony, I really appreciate everything you've done. It's only been 2 weeks since this shitstorm started, and the only positive thing that's happened is that I feel like I have a new friend, I said. You're right. You have made a friend. I don't usually get so personally involved in things. I just hope that when this is over, you'll still consider me a friend, Tony said. I don't think that will be a problem. I value friendship, and besides, I think having a cop as a friend would be a smart move on my part, I said. You know, you're not as dumb as you seem, Tony said. I hear that a lot. After the conversation, I went off to pack for the trip. I needed to take enough clothes for a 2-week stay while traveling light. I still wasn't strong enough to handle heavy suitcases. I managed to use a small bag and a small carry-on. I packed mostly socks and underwear. I took 3 pairs of pants, 3 shorts, and 6 short-sleeve shirts. I knew Charlie's house had a washer and dryer, so I didn't need a lot of shirts and pants. If I needed anything else, I could buy it in Vegas. Next chapter. At 10:30. Saturday morning, I was in Las Vegas, in a cab heading west on Charleston Boulevard. The temperature that morning was already 101 degrees and climbing ever higher. When I stepped out of the airport terminal building, I felt like a blast furnace had collapsed on me. Fortunately, the cab had good air conditioning. Charlie Carson's house was on Desert Foothills Drive, which is about 7 miles west of Las Vegas Boulevard. When the cab stopped in front of the house, I was very surprised. Charlie said it was a small house. I guess it was small, if you consider 3,500 square feet small. The house was finished in white stucco with a red tile roof, like most of the other houses in the neighborhood, but this one seemed more elegant. The front entrance consisted of heavy red oak double doors with stained glass windows. The doors opened into a large foyer with a stone tile floor. The air conditioning was already on, and the house was a comfortable 72 degrees. Exploring the house, I discovered it was a smart home. Everything was controlled by a computer. Charlie could control the climate control, alarm system, and security lights remotely via the internet. There were security cameras above the front entrance, above the garage door, and in the back of the house overlooking the back door and pool. Everything was high-tech. Inside, the house looked like the cover of Architectural Digest magazine. The master bedroom was on the second floor and was huge. The room took up the entire depth of the house, so the windows faced east and west. The west-facing windows had a beautiful view of the mountains. The east-facing windows overlooked the hotels along the street and the pool in the backyard. The back of the house faced east, which kept the midday sun off the patio and into the large pool. The house lifted my spirits for a moment. As I looked around the beautiful house, I thought, Nikki would love this. And then the depression I had been feeling for the past 3 days came over me again. How could I miss her so much and at the same time feel so angry at her? I was there, at Charlie's house, alone because of what Nikki had done. I forced myself to take my mind off of thoughts of Nikki and started thinking about how I was going to spend the rest of the day. The pool looked very inviting, but I decided it was better to do other things first while I still had energy. I knew that as the day progressed, my energy level would drop significantly. It had been like this since I woke up in the hospital almost 2 weeks ago. Each day I felt better in the mornings, and as the day went on, I felt weaker and weaker. My first task was to start the Honda that was parked in the garage to go grocery shopping. The car was 10 years old, but Charlie had obviously taken very good care of it. I was relieved to find that the battery wasn't dead and the car started on the first try, and as I drove out of the garage, I was glad I'd been paying attention in the cab, because I remembered seeing a shopping center not far from the house. It was only about 5 blocks away, and I had no trouble finding it. I bought enough food, soft drinks, and beer to last me for a week, and then headed back to the house. As I drove the car into the garage, I realized I was exhausted. There was barely enough strength to get the groceries into the house. And I managed to get the groceries laid out, and then I poured myself a big glass of orange juice, hoping it would help me regain my strength. I made myself a sandwich, and after eating, I decided to go relax by the pool and bask in the sun for a while before it disappeared to the west side of the house. I put on my swim trunks and went into the bathroom to take off my bandages and put on sunscreen. When I looked in the mirror, I saw 3 ugly scars from bullet wounds. I thought, what a great conversation piece they make. The scars made me self-conscious, so I would put on a shirt before going outside and wait until none of the neighbors saw me before taking my shirt off. The intense heat forced me to go to the pool to cool off. Feeling refreshed, I climbed out and laid down in a lounge chair and was about to fall asleep when my cell phone rang. Eric. Hey, Tony, how's it going? Good. Listen, Eric, I need to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. No problem. Ask whatever you want, I said, though I couldn't imagine what he might ask me that he hadn't already asked. Tell me about Sarah Bowden, said Tony. Sarah Bowden? What does she have to do with this? I asked. I don't know. I hope you'll tell me, said Tony. Sarah is a girl I knew in college. You dated her? Yes, I dated her 3 or 4 times. Did you have sex with her? Asked Tony. I was starting to get annoyed. What's this all about? Sorry, Eric, just part of the investigation. So did you have sex with her? No. Is that why you broke up with her, because she didn't want to do it with you? Asked Tony. No, it wasn't like that at all, I said, making it clear by the tone of my voice that I was starting to get angry. We dated a few times and we both realized the relationship was going nowhere, so we stopped seeing each other. Were you still in touch when you broke up? Yes, we continued to communicate, but we didn't break up. We never had an exclusive relationship. The relationships we had didn't last long. Why are you asking me about a girl I dated a few times over 10 years ago? It's just that something came up during the investigation that I need to follow up on. Were you dating your wife back then too? No, I hadn't met Nikki yet. Okay, then tell me about your relationship with Sarah Bowden. What exactly do you want to know? I asked. Why don't you start with how you met? I took a deep breath, trying to remember. It was a Saturday night, and I was on my way back to the frat house after a party. I stopped to get gas at one of those mini-marts at the gas station. While I was filling up the tank, a car stopped on the other side of the pumps. There was a couple in the car and the guy was yelling at the girl. I couldn't hear what they were saying to each other, but the guy was yelling pretty loud. When my tank was full, I went into the store to pay, and as I was getting out, the guy who was in the other car went into the store. "Did you know him?" asked Tony. "No. We didn't even look at each other as we walked by. Anyway, when I got back to my car, the girl jumped out of the other car and started begging me to take her with me. I saw she had a mouse under her eye and figured her boyfriend must have hit her. So I told her to get in my car and we left before her boyfriend came out of the store. She was pretty shaken up. I asked her where she wanted to go and she asked me to take her somewhere to get a cup of coffee. The only place we could find free that night was Denny's. We took an empty seat, ordered 2 cups of coffee, and just sat there. Finally, I asked her why her boyfriend hit her. She said he wasn't her boyfriend. She said she had dated him twice and he suddenly became very clingy. She said earlier that night she was at a dance and dancing with a friend when the guy walked in, grabbed her by the arm and dragged her away from the establishment. She said he forced her into his car and then started accusing her of cheating on him. When I saw them at the gas station, she tried to explain to him that they were not in a permanent relationship and she could dance with whoever she wanted. That's when he hit her. When he went into the store to buy cigarettes, she jumped out of the car and asked me to help her. We talked for a long time that night, and then I drove her back to the hostel. When I dropped her off, she thanked me for my help and then kissed me. I didn't know what else to do, so I asked her out. By the end of our first date, I realized there was no connection between us. I would have ended it right then, but I sensed she wanted me to ask her out again, so I did. On the 3rd or 4th date, we both realized it wasn't going to work out. We parted as friends. "You stayed friends?" asked Tony. I think I would have, but after that I started seeing her less often. I saw her on campus a few times over the next month or so, but we never saw each other after that. "Who was the guy who hit her?" asked Tony. "I don't know. I don't remember if she told me his name." "So, is there anything else you can tell me about Sarah Bowden?" asked Tony. "No. This is the first time anyone has mentioned her name since college. No, wait a minute. Nikki asked me about her once, about a year ago." "Why did she ask?" "I don't know," I said. "It was right after she got back from Germany. I had prepared a romantic dinner to welcome her home, and while we were eating, Nikki asked me if I knew Sarah Bowden." "And what did you tell her?" asked Tony. "The truth, that I'd met her a few times in my junior year." "And Nikki didn't tell you why she asked?" asked Tony. "Nikki said someone told her to ask me if I knew her, but she didn't say who asked," I said. "Why was your wife in Germany?" "She was a chaperone on a trip for members of the German club at the high school where Nikki teaches," said I. "Who else was on the trip with her?" "German teacher Carol Stanley and her husband Jack, European history teacher Barbara Martin and her husband Cal, counselor Janice Whiten, and gym teacher John Parker," I said. The expression on Tony's face changed for a moment, as if something I said had gotten through to him. "Why didn't you go with your wife?" "I was supposed to, but I had to cancel so I could go to a technical education conference in Denver that was scheduled for the same week," I said. "Your wife never mentioned Sarah Bowden again?" "No? So that's it then?" "Yes." "I hope so," said Tony. "What the hell does that mean?" said I. "I don't know if this Sarah Bowden has anything to do with this case, but it's a lead I have to follow, so I just hope you've told me everything I need to know about your relationship with her," Tony said. I started to feel hot. Was Tony insinuating that I had done something wrong with Sarah? I considered him a friend, and now he was talking such nonsense. "Can you tell me why you're asking me about Sarah?" I asked. "Sorry, buddy, I can't tell you anything right now," he replied. "Why are you trying to find skeletons in my closet? I thought we were friends?" "That's the problem. A friend is a cop. I still have to do my job," Tony said, and hung up. "Do your job? Bullshit." Someone was trying to sabotage the investigation by dragging Sarah into it. I couldn't imagine how she could get mixed up in this mess. I spent the rest of the weekend relaxing, spent a lot of time by the pool, and the rest of the time reading the books Charlie had in his library. The boss was really impressing me. Who would have thought he would have a great library in his house? I didn't think he ever read books. On Monday, I started increasing my physical activity. I did a 2-mile walk in the morning and started swimming laps in the afternoon. I waited for a call from Tony on Monday to let me know they had arrested my shooter, but he didn't call. After lunch, I called Nikki's dad to see how she was doing. After saying hello, I asked how Nikki was holding up. Eric, do you know that Nikki quit her job? Asked George. She quit her job? Why? Asked me. She said she was worried that rumors would start flying after it got out, said George. But I think it's more than that. I didn't know what to think about it. Nikki loved teaching, so I felt sorry for her. But at the same time, I felt that she had done this to herself. Tell her I'm sorry she had to quit her job. I will, Eric, he said. I had nothing more to say, so I ended the conversation. Next chapter. When I didn't hear from Tony until late Tuesday night, I was ready to call him, but some part of me didn't want to talk to Tony. I was still a little angry about the way he had questioned me about Sarah Bowden. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Charlie. How are you doing with the house, Eric? He asked. Fine, Charlie. I thought you said it was a small house, I said. Compared to my house in Sherman Oaks. It is, he said. So you started the car? Yeah, I started it and grabbed a couple cases of Heineken, but somehow I don't think it'll be enough before you get here. I might have to buy some more before I head home, so what's going on over there? Nothing much, but a police detective was here this morning asking about you first thing, Charlie said. I was starting to get pissed off again. Why the hell was Tony snooping around where I worked? What did he want? I asked. He wanted to see if I knew where you were. He already knows where I am. Oh, wait, no, he doesn't. I told him I was staying at a friend's house, but I didn't say whose house or give him the address. Did you tell him where I was? Yes, I hope everything was okay. No problem. It's okay if I tell the cops where I am, I said. Charlie and I talked some more about work and projects he hoped I'd be back to soon. I was feeling pretty good after the call, so I poured myself a Heineken and sat in the pool to refresh myself inside and out at the same time. When I hadn't heard from Tony by 5 p.m., I decided to drive down to the Strip. I decided to play blackjack and then have dinner. I thought about going to the Bellagio, but then I remembered how much Nikki loved the Bellagio, and I didn't want to bring it up that night. I ended up going to Treasure Island. I played blackjack for 3 hours and suddenly felt very tired. I decided to give up the idea of having dinner at one of the great restaurants on the Strip and just go back to the house. I got back to the house just before 9 o'clock, and it wasn't until I was in the kitchen making a sandwich that I noticed I had missed a call on my cell phone. I must not have heard the call when I was at the casino. I checked my voicemail and there was a message from Tony. It said, "Call me," and included his cell phone number. I was still pissed at him, so I waited until I finished my sandwich before I called him. You wanted me to call? I said when he picked up the phone. Where the hell have you been? Asked Tony. Whoa, what the hell is this? I don't have to check up on you. I left tonight, I said. Sorry to be rude, but we have a problem. We don't know where he is, said Tony. You don't know where, who is? Our suspect. He didn't come back from the meeting in Denver, Tony said. We know he checked out of the hotel, went to the airport and got on a plane to LA, but we lost him at LAX. So the guy who shot me is still at large? Jesus, how could that happen? I asked. I'm sorry, buddy, but it wasn't my fault. If you remember, I wanted him picked up in Denver and held for extradition, but I was turned down. Now he's on the loose. We don't know if he knows we're looking for him or not. We hope he doesn't. You should be safe there, and we're keeping a close eye on your wife. We don't think she's contacted him, but we're doing everything we can to make sure she does. Do you think Nikki might have tipped him off that you were looking for him? I wouldn't think so, but now? Who knows? Well, how are you doing? Asked Tony. I'd be doing a lot better if you'd stop prying into my business and catch this guy, I said. No. What do you mean prying into your business? Asked Tony. First you called me and started asking about a girl I knew over 10 years ago and wouldn't tell me why. And then this morning you started snooping around my place of employment, asking questions about me. What are you talking about? Asked Tony. My boss called me this morning and told me you were there this morning asking questions about me. Shit, that wasn't me, Eric. What kind of questions? It wasn't you? Did you send someone else there? No. Charlie told me that the cop who went there asked him where I was, and he told him. Oh shit. You need to get out of the house right now. Get a hotel room somewhere and don't talk to anyone but me, said Tony. Do you think he'll come here? I don't know, but I think it's a good bet. Why else would he know where you are? Tony? What? I think it's time you told me who the hell this guy is, I said. John Parker. The school gym teacher? That's right. How well do you know him? Asked Tony. I don't really know him at all, I said. Nikki talked about him a lot when he first came to school 2 years ago. She thought he'd do a good job as a gym teacher and soccer coach. I've never met him myself. Oh shit. I just remembered that Nikki told me that Parker once told her he knew who I was in college. But you don't know him? I don't remember his name from my college days, and I don't know if I'd recognize him if I saw him, I said. And then another thought hit me. Is Nikki really having an affair with John Parker? I felt my chest tighten at the realization. How long had this been going on, and how had I not seen any signs that Nikki was cheating on me? I felt hurt, betrayed, angry, and stupid all at the same time. We're still not sure what kind of relationship Mr. Parker and your wife have. We only know what she told us, but we don't know if it's true yet. But we'll find out, Tony said. And what did Nikki tell you? I'm sorry, Eric, but I just can't tell you right now. I promise I'll tell you everything as soon as I can. In the meantime, I just want you to get out of this house and find another place to sleep. He might already be here. The flight from LAX to Vegas only takes an hour, I said. He could be there, but he hasn't flown. We've been monitoring the airports, contacting his credit card company, and he hasn't made any payments today. If he's in Vegas, he traveled there by car. I want you to leave the house right now and make sure you're not being followed. If you think someone is following you, call me immediately, Tony said. What can you do if I'm being followed? You're in LA, and I'm in Vegas, said I. I can contact the Las Vegas police and have them come to your rescue. Okay, I'm leaving. I closed my phone and started to turn off the lights. Once it was dark inside the house, I looked out the windows and searched for cars parked on the street. Finding no cars parked outside, I walked into the garage and got into Charlie's Honda. Throughout this whole ordeal, I had experienced just about every imaginable emotion. But as I sat in the dark and considered my next steps, I felt fear for the first time. I started the Honda and waited a few more seconds before pressing the button on the remote to open the garage door. Once there was an open space under the door, I drove out of the garage, quickly pressing the button to close the door, and turned left onto the street. Part 3. I was 2 blocks from the house, and there were no other cars in sight. No one was following me, and I was beginning to think that maybe it wasn't John Parker visiting Charlie that morning. Maybe it was a policeman and Tony just didn't know about it. I was waiting at the light to turn left onto Charleston Boulevard when I saw a silver Ford Explorer turning right from Charleston onto Desert Foothills Drive. I cast a quick glance at the SUV and, although I couldn't see the driver through the tinted windows, I saw that the car had California license plates. Having seen California plates on a car in Nevada, I wasn't surprised, but seeing a car with California plates turn onto the street where I was staying was too much of a coincidence for me. Driving east through Charleston, I was trying to decide which hotel I should go to when I came across the I-15 interchange. In that instant, I made a decision. I turned right onto the southbound I-15 interchange. If John Parker was looking for me in Las Vegas, I was going back to Los Angeles. The 10-year-old Honda performed admirably, easily maintaining 75 to 80 miles per hour all the way to the 10. Things slowed down a bit there, but at 2:30 a.m., I was already in Burbank and settled into a small hotel near the Burbank airport. I wasn't sure it was okay to drive home because I still wasn't sure if John Parker was looking for me in Vegas. Maybe he's staking out my house. Or maybe he's already on his way to Mexico. I really had no idea what was going on. I sat down on the bed in my dingy hotel room and started asking myself questions again, trying to make sense of what was going on. Why did John Parker want to kill me? Did he want to get me out of the way so he could get Nikki? That was a possibility, but it didn't make sense. If he wanted Nikki and she wanted to be with him, they didn't need to kill me. A divorce would have been a lot easier. I didn't have a lot of money that Nikki could inherit. Financially, she would have survived the divorce. Something else had to happen. I was beginning to wish I had told Nikki what I knew before I brought Tony and Jim in. Maybe she would have told me what was wrong. My body was aching, my head was starting to hurt, and I needed sleep. In the morning, I called Tony and told him where I was. I also told him about the car with California license plates that I had seen the night before. "What kind of car was it?" asked Tony. "It was a silver Ford Explorer," I said. "It must have been his Explorer," said Tony. "We found out late last night that Mr. Parker had parked his Ford Explorer at the Los Angeles airport when he left for Denver. We were able to get a picture of him with a security camera as he was pulling out of the parking lot Sunday night." "Where are you now?" "I'm at the hotel, room 254, I said. 45 minutes later, Tony was standing at my door. When he walked in, he was holding a briefcase, which he placed on the only table in the small room. Opening the briefcase, Tony pulled out a photograph and held it out to me. "Do you recognize him?" he asked. It was a black and white photograph, taken from a high angle, looking through the windshield of a car. The man sitting in the driver's seat had dark hair and a fairly ordinary face. He seemed rather large, but it was hard to tell from the photo. I didn't recognize him. I looked at Tony and asked, "Is that John Parker?" "That's him. Have you seen him before?" he asked. "No, he doesn't look familiar to me at all," I said. "I've notified the Las Vegas police and the Nevada State Police to look for his car. They'll arrest him if they find it and hold it for us," Tony said. "I think you'll want to watch this." Tony then pulled a videotape out of his briefcase and placed it on the table. "I'm not supposed to let anyone watch this yet, but I thought you should. You don't have to tell anyone that I gave you this." "I won't tell, but what is it?" "You'll have to wait and see," Tony said. "I have to get back to the station. As you can imagine, things have gone a little crazy since Mr. Parker disappeared." Tony stood at the door, ready to leave, and said, "I'll call you later, and we can talk." As the door closed behind Tony, I looked at the TV on the dresser. I knew there wouldn't be a VCR on there, but I looked anyway. I called the front desk and asked if they had a VCR I could rent. The guy who answered the phone said they had VCRs, and if I wanted to borrow one, he would send it to my room. I was very surprised when the VCR was delivered 5 minutes later. I did not expect this level of service at this hotel. It only took me a few minutes to plug in the VCR. I loaded the videotape into the player, but waited another minute before hitting the play button. I was a little scared of what I was going to see. I was about ready to hit the play button when I remembered something from the hospital. I remembered waking up and hearing Nikki talking to some man standing by the door. She called him John. Maybe it was Parker? I thought about it for another minute and remembered what they were talking about. Nikki said, "John, you really shouldn't be here." "Does he remember what happened?" Nikki replied, "I don't know." Detective Trenka tried to ask him about it yesterday, but Eric was too doped up on painkillers to give any answers. As soon as he can talk to the police, I want to know what he's going to tell them. "John, please leave before he wakes up and sees you. Besides, Detective Trenka could come back at any moment." John said, "Okay, I'm leaving, but remember what I said." "I will. Now, please leave." "I just can't hang out with you right now," said Nikki. "She kept it in my goddamn hospital room," I said out loud. I'd have to be sure to tell Tony about this. Finally, I took a deep breath and hit the play button. The TV screen was all snowy for a few seconds, then the picture flipped a few times and calmed down. On the screen, I saw Nikki and Jim sitting at a table facing the camera. The room was painted gray, and the tabletop was the same gray. Nikki was wearing the same clothes she had been wearing the week before when she left the house with Jim. I assumed the videotape was taken that night. Jim was talking quietly to Nikki, and she had her hands on the table in front of her with her palms facing down, staring straight ahead with no expression on her face. After a minute, the door on the left side of the room opened and a man dressed in gray slacks and a white shirt with no tie entered. "Good evening, Mrs. Anderson. I'm Detective Harris, and I'll be conducting this interview. Before we begin, would you like a glass of water, or do you need a bathroom break?" he asked. "No, I don't need anything right now," Nikki replied in a weak, monotone voice. "Great. Then let's get started," said Detective Harris. As far as I could tell, the video camera was hidden behind a two-way mirror. I got that impression because no one in the room was paying any attention to the camera. I expected that if the camera had been in the room, it would have attracted Nikki and Jim's attention. "Mrs. Anderson, I would like to begin with the events that took place at your home on Friday the 8th of August. If you answer the questions truthfully and in as much detail as possible, I think we can clear things up quickly, Detective Harris said. Nikki replied, Okay. So, Mrs. Anderson, were you in the house when your husband was shot? Asked Detective Harris. Nikki dropped her head to her chest. Yes. Who shot your husband? Asked Detective Harris. It was an accident, replied Nikki. Mrs. Anderson, who shot your husband? Asked Detective Harris again. John Parker, Nikki said in a voice barely above a whisper. Who's John Parker? He's the gym teacher at my school. Where were you when your husband was shot? Asked Detective Harris. I was hiding in the closet. If you were hiding in the closet, how do you know the shooting was accidental? Asked Detective Harris. John told me what happened, replied Nikki. Okay, Mrs. Anderson, why don't you tell me what happened that afternoon? John and I were upstairs in my bedroom when we heard the front door open, Nikki said. I knew Eric wouldn't be home because I was supposed to pick him up at the airport that evening, so I freaked out. I picked up the phone to call 911, but John ordered me to be quiet and he walked out of the room to the top of the stairs and looked down. A few seconds later, he came back into the bedroom and whispered that someone was snooping around downstairs, then told me to hide in the closet until he came for me. How long were you in the closet? I don't know, a minute, maybe two, said Nikki. And then what happened? I heard gunshots. I was terrified. I thought someone had shot John, and I was sure they'd find me too, Nikki said in a shaky voice. I was sitting on the floor in the closet, listening for any sound that might tell me what was going to happen next, and then the closet door opened, and there stood John. His face was ashy. I asked him what happened, picking myself up off the floor. He started mumbling, "It was an accident. It was an accident." I followed him to the bedroom door and he said, I thought I saw a gun in his hand. I panicked and shot him. I didn't realize what he was talking about until I looked down the stairs and saw Eric lying there. I ran down the stairs and yelled to John to call 911, but John was right behind me on the stairs and said it was too late. He said if Eric wasn't already dead, he would be dead before help arrived. By then, I was sitting at the bottom of the stairs trying to see if Eric was breathing. While I was doing that, John said, "We've got to make it look like a robbery." That's when I noticed Eric was still breathing, and I told John I was going to call 911. John grabbed my hand and told me to wait a few minutes while he tried to make it look like a burglary, and then went into the family room. I could hear him throwing things around the room, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer, and dialed 911. I was immediately put on hold. John returned to the lobby while I waited for the 911 operator to answer. He asked what I was doing, and I told him I was calling 911. John took my face in his hand, pulled it to his, and said, "When the police arrive, tell them you came home and found Eric lying there and don't tell them anything else." I asked him why, and he said, "The police will never believe it was an accident. They will think we killed him on purpose." I was so scared and confused that when the 911 operator finally got on the phone, I told her that I came home for lunch and found Eric on the floor at the bottom of the stairs and that it looked like he had been shot. "What was Mr. Parker doing while you were on the phone?" asked Detective Harris. He stood and watched me until I finished talking, and then he said, "Remember to stick to the story. If you don't and the police come after me, you'll go down with me." Now, what did Mr. Parker do after he warned you to stick to the story? John did something strange. He leaned over to Eric and I thought he was checking to see if he was alive. Then he whispered something in Eric's ear and then he left, Nikki said. "Did he say something to your husband? Did you hear what he said to him?" asked Detective Harris. "I'm not sure, but part of it sounded like, 'It's for Sarah,' but I can't be sure. I barely heard him." "What did you think it meant?" asked Detective Harris. "I have no idea," said Nikki. "Who do you think Sarah is?" asked Detective Harris. "I'm not sure. He might have been talking about the girl Eric dated in college before we met. Sarah Bowden." "Why do you think he was talking about Sarah Bowden?" "John asked me once if Eric knew Sarah Bowden. I saw Detective Harris write Sarah Bowden's name on his notepad and underline it. 'We'll get back to her later,' he said. 'Right now, I'd like to know about your relationship with John Parker.'" "What do you mean about my relationship with John Parker?" asked Nikki defensively. "Exactly that. What is the nature of your relationship with Mr. Parker?" "John is my boss. He's a teacher at my middle school." Is that your only relationship with him? Asked Detective Harris. Nikki tensed, and I saw Jim put his hand over hers to reassure her. What are you trying to imply? Said Nikki. I was just wondering why Mr. Parker was in the bedroom with you, he said. Would you mind explaining that? He followed me up the stairs, said Nikki. Why was Mr. Parker at your house? Asked Detective Harris. He went there with me this afternoon. So you had lunch together? Yes, with several other teachers. I want the names of those who had lunch with you that day, said Detective Harris. After lunch, why did you and Mr. Parker go to your house? I spilled tomato sauce on my blouse, so I went home to change my blouse, Nikki said. Who was driving? I was driving. Did Mr. Parker drive with you? Yes. So, when you arrived at your house, you both went inside and Mr. Parker followed you upstairs to change your blouse? Asked Detective Harris. He didn't follow me up the stairs. You just said he followed you upstairs, said Detective Harris. When we entered the house, John went into the family room, and I went upstairs to change my clothes. But then he went upstairs. Yes. Why? He was carrying the beer mug he bought for me in Germany, Nikki said. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Parker had bought that mug for Nikki, and then she had the nerve to give it to me like it was such a special gift. The acid in my stomach began to churn. What a bitch. Why did he bring a beer glass upstairs? The detective asked. He wanted to remind me of our night in Germany, Nikki said. Why do you think he went upstairs with the glass instead of waiting for you to come down? Tears streamed down Nikki's face as she answered. I guess he wanted me to do it with him, Nikki said. I felt a tingle down my spine when Nikki said that Parker had followed her up the stairs to do it with her. I felt like my body was about to explode. So, would you call your relationship with Mr. Parker sexual? Asked Detective Harris. No, I did not have sex with him. Was that because your husband came home and interrupted you? No. Detective Harris was beginning to take on the features of a pit bull. He smelled blood and was ready to go in for the kill. Part of me wanted him to break Nikki, and part of me wanted him to be gentler with her. I wasn't going to do this with John. Nikki was becoming very agitated and was having a hard time controlling her temper. Jim continued to whisper to her, trying to calm her down. You said that Mr. Parker followed you upstairs to do it with you, but now you're saying you weren't going to do it with him. What exactly, Mrs. Anderson? Asked Detective Harris. He came upstairs with that damn beer mug and tried to talk me into it, but I wasn't going to engage with him, said Nikki. He tried to talk you into it? You mean he tried to seduce you? Yeah, I guess so, Nikki said. Did he have any reason to believe that you would agree to do it with him? Asked Detective Harris. He kept talking about what happened in Germany and how we should... Before I could finish Nikki's answer, the hotel room came into motion. It took me less than 2 seconds to realize we were having an earthquake. I quickly stepped back to the bathroom doorway to wait it out. It felt like a pretty strong earthquake, maybe a magnitude 6. The large picture window in the room cracked and then flew out of its frame and fell into the parking lot below. A moment later, the power went out. It all lasted less than 30 seconds, but I could already hear sirens all over the city as well as all the car alarms in Los Angeles County. I sat on my bed and waited for the power to come back on, but there was none. I waited for over an hour, but as it started to get dark, I unplugged the VCR and took it to the front desk to ask if I could take the VCR with me and return it the next day because my tape was stuck in it. When I got to the hotel lobby, I noticed that there was a light on. I asked the desk clerk about it and he said they had an emergency generator. I asked him about taking my VCR with me and he said he couldn't let me do that. Then he suggested that I plug the VCR into one of the outlets serviced by the generator and then I could remove the tape. 5 minutes later, I was already sitting in the Honda with the tape and heading toward my house. I hoped that I would have electricity when I arrived there. I called Tony and told him where I was going and why. He said he needed to talk to me and that he would meet me at my house in about half an hour. When I got to the house, it was very dark outside. There was no moon that night and the electricity was out all over the city. With no streetlights, I could barely see my house from the driveway when I turned off my car headlights. I grabbed the videotape from the front seat of the car and headed for the front door. It was so dark that I stepped on the edge of the sidewalk every now and then, nearly spraining my ankle a couple of times. At the front door, I had to kneel down to try to put the key in the lock. It was so dark that I figured it would be easier for me to get the key into the lock if I closed my eyes, and it worked. When I opened the door and stepped inside, I found it was even darker. I raised my hand in front of my face, but I couldn't see it. And then I knew there was a powerful flashlight in the kitchen pantry. All I had to do was walk through the foyer and down the hallway to the kitchen, a distance of about 15 feet, then to the right another 6 feet, and I would be at the pantry door. It usually took me 5 or 6 seconds to cover that distance, but in the darkness I moved very slowly. I had never been afraid of the dark as a child, but I had never faced such deep blackness as I found myself in this night. 30 seconds later, shuffling my feet on the floor and resting my shoulder against the wall, I reached the door to the kitchen. I still don't know why I stopped there, but when I did, I felt something that made the hair on the back of my neck and then my arms stir. It took me a few seconds to realize what caused this heightened level of fear. It was some kind of odor. It reached me as soon as I was in the doorway of the kitchen. It was a strong, sour odor of body odor and something else. For a moment, I thought that maybe it was me that smelled bad, but then I recognized the other smell. It was the breath of whiskey. There was someone else in the house, but who? Someone had taken advantage of the power outage by breaking into my house, or was it something even more sinister? I considered all the possibilities and decided I didn't like coincidences. I decided it wasn't the marauder, it was Parker. I froze in place, listening to see if there was any sound that might give away his location. He could have been right in front of me or even right behind me. I hoped that Parker's night vision was no better than mine and that the lights would stay off until I figured out how to get out of the house without running into him. After thinking through several options, I decided that my best hope was to try to get to the pantry. If I could get a flashlight, I could shine it in Parker's eyes to temporarily blind him and then use it as a weapon. I was sure Parker had a gun, or he wouldn't have come into the house. I just couldn't understand why he would risk coming after me. I slowly let all the air out of my lungs, and then just as slowly inhaled deeply so as not to make a noise. Then I stepped into the kitchen with my back against the wall and began to move in small side steps toward the door to the pantry. I stopped at every step to listen. I couldn't hear him, but I could feel his presence in the room. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the pantry door. Now I had to move away from the wall to open the door. I felt the beginnings of a panic attack. I had been taking very small breaths to keep quiet, and now it felt like I couldn't get enough air. I wanted to take deep breaths, but I didn't dare to do so. This only increased my panic. I had an overwhelming urge to scream and run out of the house, but I couldn't. After standing for a moment longer, I extended my right leg forward about a foot and then followed it with my left. I was about to repeat the process when I felt him. We weren't touching, but I could feel the warmth of his body. I didn't know what to do. Did Parker know I was so close to him? I could feel his breath, and his body odor was strong enough to make my eyes water. I pondered whether I should back away quickly or pounce on him, and hope the impact was strong enough to give me time to get out of the house. Before I could make a decision, I felt his hand run down my face. "Hey, Eric." Parker said it in the meanest voice I'd ever heard. I instinctively realized that Parker had only touched me to get a better idea of where I stood so he could take a shot at me. I immediately reached out my hands and pushed him as hard as I could, taking a step to the right. I must have caught him off guard because he backed up just as I fired. The flash blinded me, the noise deafening, but the bullet missed me. Turning around quickly, I found the door to the pantry and opened it. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. While in the kitchen, Parker fired 2 more shots looking for a flashlight. I found a large, heavy-duty flashlight on the top shelf of the pantry and grabbed it. Then I squeezed myself into the corner as far as I could so that if Parker found the door to the pantry and opened it, I would be out of his line of fire. Leaning my back against the wall, I kept my left hand on the edge of the door just to get my bearings. I figured that if Parker found the pantry door and opened it, I would use the flashlight as a club and try to hit him with it. It was quiet for a few seconds and then Parker spoke to me. "Eric, why are you making this so difficult? I've waited a long time for this night. Why don't you just give up and meet your fate like a man?" he said. I was tempted to call out to him and ask him what was wrong, but I felt like he didn't want to talk. He wanted to kill me. "Come on, Eric. 1 bullet to the head and it's over. Then I'll get Nicole, and she and I will celebrate your death. I knew what Parker wanted. He wanted to make me angry enough to say or do something that would let him know where I was hiding. It worked. I could barely control the rage growing inside me. And then I felt the pantry door move. It didn't open. It was leaned open. Apparently, it was leaning against the door. "So, Eric, where are you?" he said in a sing-song voice. "I bet you didn't know that Nicole came to my hotel room when we were in Germany last year and said she wanted me to spend time with her. She was so nice that I bought her a beautiful beer glass the next day." His words had a definite effect on me. The only good thing was that it was clear from his conversation that he had his back against the pantry door. "The day before you were supposed to come home from Dallas, Nicole asked me to kill you so we could be together," he said. "I had planned to do it when she picked you up at the airport that night, but you had to come home early. Oh well, the best laid plans of mice and men? I guess Nicole and I will have to leave the country tonight after I destroy you." At that moment, rage took over. I braced myself by taking a deep breath, and then hit the door with all my might. The door swung open, throwing Parker forward, and I came at him from behind. We were thrown back against the dining room table, and Parker lost his balance and fell into one of the chairs, with me hanging on his back. We hit the floor hard, and I thought I heard a gun slide across the floor, but in the darkness I couldn't be sure. All I knew was that I was going to have to subdue the bastard somehow. I didn't realize how big he was until I was on top of him. The fall had knocked the spirit out of Parker, and I had a moment to try and gain an advantage over him. I switched the flashlight to my left hand and then slid my hand under his right armpit and put my palm behind his head. This immobilized his right arm. Unfortunately, I had forgotten that he was left-handed. I leaned to my left, clutching his right arm tighter, when he hit me hard in the side with his left elbow. For a moment, I thought I might pass out. Instinctively, I knew that if I passed out, I would never wake up again. As I waited for my head to clear, I felt his body tense up and figured he was going to try to elbow me again. I picked up the flashlight and brought it down as hard as I could, hoping it would hit him somewhere in the arm. There was a loud crack, and Parker shrieked as the flashlight hit his arm. I had no idea what damage it could do, and I wasn't about to take any chances. I raised the flashlight and brought it down sharply again. This time, on contact, the flashlight flew out of my hand and rolled across the floor. Parker let out another scream and then fell silent. I felt his breathing become ragged and steady. I was beginning to wonder if I had caused him to pass out, but then he spoke. "You're going to pay for this, Eric," he said. I could feel the rage building in me, but it was draining all my strength. Things were beginning to clear up. I knew that if I didn't stay calm, I wouldn't be ready for Parker's next move. Taking advantage of the fact that Parker seemed to be taking a break from fighting to regain his strength, I unbuckled my cell phone from my belt and opened it. The light from the display let me see that Parker was lying down with his face turned to the right. His left arm was on the floor. I couldn't tell if his arm was injured or if he was just waiting for the right moment to go on the offensive again. It only took me a few seconds to find Tony's number and hit the speed dial button. Tony picked up on the third ring. "Tony, Parker is here in the house with me. Hurry up," I said, without waiting for Tony to answer. "Help won't be here in time to save her," Parker said. "Tomorrow, Nicole and I are going to sit on the beach in Rio sipping cocktails and laughing about what a wuss you are. I'm going to make you cry before you die so I can tell Nicole what a child you were." At that moment, a thought hit me. I realized what he was trying to do and wondered if I could reverse his move. It was a gamble, but I had to try. I leaned down to his ear and said, "You know, John, Sarah told me she didn't want to be with you because she heard you were inadequate in bed. She said she doesn't want wimps, and that's why she likes me." That hit a nerve. "Shut the hell up about Sarah," he said. In the light of the phone, I could see Parker practically foaming at the mouth uttering this latest threat. Suddenly, I began to question whether my last tactic had been such a good idea. Everything was quiet for a few seconds, and then my phone's display went off and the lights went out, plunging us back into total darkness. That's when Parker made his move. Suddenly, Parker was on his knees and I was struggling to hold on to him. Somehow, Parker found himself in a standing position and twisted his body in a circle. I lost my grip and was thrown across the room. I knew I should try to get out of the house, but in the darkness I didn't know where I had landed and I didn't know which direction to go. I sat down on the floor and kept as quiet as possible. I listened to see if there was any movement on Parker's part. After a few seconds, I heard him. It sounded like he was fumbling back and forth on the floor with his hand, trying to find his gun. I began to slide my hand across the floor away from Parker, hoping to find something that might tell me what part of the room I was in. I continued to do this until I felt my back against the wall. Sliding my hand along the baseboard in an attempt to determine exactly where I was, I came across the spring-loaded stop of the door to the pantry. I now knew where I was, but unfortunately my hand bent the spring stop and it popped out of my hand with a loud twang sound. I'm not sure I'll ever fully realize what happened in the next few seconds. I knew that the noise the stopper made would give away my position and that Parker would guess where I was. Before I could do anything, there was a flash and an explosion as Parker fired a shot in my direction. The bullet hit right above my head, and I felt pieces of drywall fall on top of me. I figured he must have thought I was standing, but the flash from the shot would have shown him I was sitting on the floor. I feared the next shot would be exactly on target. My ears were ringing from the first shot, so it was hard for me to make out other sounds. I thought I heard someone yelling, so I assumed it was Parker yelling at me again. A second later, Parker was illuminated by a bright light. I could now see Parker sitting on the floor facing me. He was only 7 feet away from me, raised his gun and pointed it at me. I heard another scream and then 3 shots. Parker seemed to be toppled over on his back. As the realization of what had happened began to set in, I turned my head to the right and was blinded by 3 flashlight beams. A uniformed police officer with a flashlight stepped forward and quickly approached Parker. He tossed Parker's gun aside and then checked for a pulse on his neck. "He's still alive, sir," the officer said. Then another uniformed officer started talking into a walkie-talkie. I was still in a daze when Tony Trenka squatted down next to me. "Are you all right, Eric?" he asked. "Do you have any injuries?" "No, he missed," I said. "But I don't think he'd miss next time. Thanks for saving my ass." "Which one of you shot him?" "All of us," Tony said. Next chapter. By the time Parker was taken away in the ambulance, I'd already had time to tell the story of what happened to 3 different detectives, and each one of them was telling me how lucky I was. Like I didn't know that. After most of the cops left, Tony and I sat down in the family room and talked. I looked at Tony and said, "I don't understand why he suddenly decided to kill me." "It was an obsession. I think he felt you had taken something that belonged to him and wanted revenge," Tony said. "It wasn't about Nikki, was it?" "No. He used her to get to you," Tony said. "Sarah Bowden?" "Yes. Her name came up a couple times during your wife's interrogation, and I tracked her down. Now it's Mrs. Cooper. She's married and lives in Phoenix. I spoke to her on the phone just before I came here." "What did you learn from her?" I asked. "I asked Mrs. Cooper if she knew you, and she said she did, and she told me the same story you told me about how you met, and that you dated 3 times and both decided it was going nowhere. Then I asked her about John Parker. She was silent for a while and I had to prompt her again to answer the question. She said John Parker was the guy she was with that night you met her at the gas station. She said she didn't see him for months after that night, and then he called her. He apologized for his behavior and made a big speech about how sorry he was, and then asked if he could come over to her apartment to talk to her for a few minutes. She made the mistake of thinking he was sincere and let him come over. According to her, when Parker came to her apartment, he acted like a perfect gentleman for a while, and then suddenly told her how angry he was that she had run away from him that night. He told her that she was his, and nothing was going to change that. She then said he tried to rape her. She pulled away from him, picked up her phone and got ready to dial 911. Mr. Parker told her to call. He said he would just tell the police they were going to look into it, but she suddenly changed her mind. Since nothing happened, the police would probably believe him, and she could get in trouble for making a false police report. Mrs. Cooper said she realized it would be difficult to prove anything, and all she wanted was for him to get out of her apartment. As he left, she said, Mr. Parker told her he was going to take care of her boyfriend, and if he saw them together, he would kill them both. Mrs. Cooper said she was not seeing anyone at the time, so she assumed he told her he didn't want her to see anyone. She said that if she had known that the threat was directed specifically at you, she would have let you know. According to her, it didn't occur to her because the two of you had stopped seeing each other more than a month before her meeting with Mr. Parker. Mrs. Cooper said Mr. Parker started calling her several times a week, So she eventually dropped out of school and moved to Phoenix without leaving a forwarding address. And he never found her in Phoenix? I asked. No. There was only one person at UCLA who knew where Mrs. Cooper had gone when she left school in the middle of the semester, and Mr. Parker didn't know her. I found this friend, and through him I found Mrs. Cooper's parents, and they helped me get in touch with her. I hope Parker goes to jail for a long time. I'd hate to think he might be looking for me when he gets out of jail, I said. I don't think you'll ever hear from Mr. Parker again. The chances of him surviving his injuries are very slim. When he left here, it looked like he was already in a coma. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Certainly not joy, but perhaps relief. Sorry, buddy, but your house is a crime scene again, Tony said. You'll have to leave everything where it is until we're done. It won't take long. Internal Affairs will want to stop by in the morning. It's required after an officer-involved shooting. In this case, there were 3 officers involved. You should have your house back by noon tomorrow. Can I stay here tonight? I asked. I don't want to find a hotel for the night. I don't think that will be a problem. Just don't touch anything in the kitchen until the investigation is over, Tony said. I won't touch anything. I just want to go to bed. Did you finish watching the video? Asked Tony. No. I was interrupted by the earthquake. Oh, right. You told me that. Just try not to tell anyone I gave you this copy, and after you watch it, get rid of it. Throw it away or rewrite it, Tony said. What's going to happen to Nikki? I asked. I don't know, said Tony. That's for the prosecutor's office to decide. I wasn't at your wife's interview, and I haven't seen the tape of her interview yet. I meant to review it last week, but I didn't have time. She cooperated. If she told the truth and is believed, then maybe she won't be charged with anything, Tony said. We stood up and Tony said, I have to go now. I'll let you know if I find out anything about your wife, one way or another. I walked Tony to the door. Thanks, Tony. I think I owe you a whiskey, said I. At least 2, Tony said as he walked out. Next chapter. Standing alone in my family room, I thought about what Parker had told me. Was any of it true? I had already heard Nikki say that Parker had bought a beer glass for her, so he was telling the truth. Did Nikki have fun with him when they were in Germany? Had he really managed to seduce her into having an affair with him in his quest to get to me? I found it hard to believe Nikki could have done such a thing, but I knew Nikki had lied to me about buying the Stein. How many other lies had she told me? I thought about watching the video to the end, but I was too exhausted. I decided I would watch it the next day. That night I slept restlessly. My dreams were filled with images of the past 3 weeks. Some were real events and some were nightmarish images inspired by my deepest fears and darkest thoughts. On Friday morning, I woke up to the doorbell ringing. I threw on my robe and went to open the door. Standing outside the door were 2 men in simple brown suits. For a moment I wondered if they had bought their suits from the same store where Tony had bought the suit he wore the first time we met. The 2 men introduced themselves as detectives from Internal Affairs and said they were here to inspect the scene of the shooting. One of them asked me if I or anyone else had touched anything in the kitchen after the shooting. I replied that no one had been in the kitchen since the investigators left the night before. They asked me to tell them what had happened, and when they finished questioning me about the shooting, I went back upstairs to take a shower, and they finished their investigation in my kitchen. When I came downstairs, the 2 IAB guys were ready to leave. They said they were done, and now I could clean up after myself. After they left, I called the same company I had called to clean up the blood from the foyer floor, and they said they wouldn't be able to come until afternoon on Monday. I told them it would be fine and made an appointment. By 11 a.m., power was restored to parts of the city, thankfully including most of Sherman Oaks. With the power back on, I decided to make some coffee and then watch the continuation of Nikki's interview. I looked around the kitchen but didn't see the videotape anywhere. I tried to remember what I had done with the tape when I came into the house the night before, but I couldn't. I went out to the car, but it wasn't there either. Then it occurred to me that the Ovir guys might have found the tape in the kitchen and taken it with them. There was no label on the tape, so unless they checked it on my VCR, they wouldn't know what was on it. Did I drop the tape on the floor when I pushed Parker? If the IAB guys had found the tape on the kitchen floor, they might have thought it was important. Eventually, the tape disappeared and there was nothing I could do about it. I'd have to warn Tony to cover his ass. I didn't want him to get in trouble for giving me a copy of the tape of Nikki's interrogation. Without the tape, I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt very alone. I wanted Nikki to be home with me. I missed her terribly and wondered if we could ever be together again. Then, some of the things Parker had said to me started to eat away at my psyche. How could Nikki be involved with this man? I began to realize that none of this could have happened if Nikki wasn't connected to Parker in some way. Whether she had a brief affair with him while they were in Germany, or whether it continued after they returned home didn't matter. Either way, our marriage was over. I still couldn't believe that Nikki wanted me dead. I would never believe it. My mood soured and I decided my coffee needed fortifying, so I headed to the pantry to get some bourbon. As I approached the pantry for the bourbon, I looked back at the bloody stain on the floor. For a moment, I thought I saw Parker's face staring back at me from the dark red puddle. I flinched slightly as I turned away to open the pantry. I could still feel a chill down my spine as I stood looking at the amber liquid in the bottle of Maker's Mark and said out loud for the first time, "I hope that bastard is dead." For a moment, my gaze stopped on the shelf where the flashlight had lain the day before. "Ah, yes, now I remember," I said to myself. Then I turned around to see if the flashlight was lying on the floor. It wasn't. Apparently, it had been taken away as evidence. I spent the rest of the day weighing everything I knew and working out a plan of action on what I should do about Nikki. In the evening, Tony stopped by my place to pick up 2 drinks I owed him. He informed me that John Parker had been in a coma until 12:45 and then passed away from his wounds. I poured Tony another whiskey, as it was obvious he needed it. He was trying to act like it was no big deal. But I could see that taking a man's life, even if it was justified, was a heavy burden for Tony. We discussed his feelings about the shooting, though he said he didn't want to talk about it, and then he gave me some other news. I talked to the assistant district attorney, and she said they're not going to press charges against your wife, Tony said. She said Mrs. Anderson has cooperated fully with the investigation, and they don't believe she was materially involved in the attempt on your life by Mr. Parker. I was glad that Nikki had gotten out of this mess, but I had yet to decide what to do with Nikki. Tony told me about his conversation with the ADA, and what she said was her reason for not pressing charges against Nikki. As I listened to Tony, I began to feel a strange feeling in my body. It felt like my body was losing weight as I sat there. Part of my mind was focused on what Tony was telling me, and the other part was deciding what I should do about my marriage. By 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, I was already sitting in the Honda and driving to Nikki's parents' house. George met me at the door, asked me how I was doing, and led me into the living room where Mary and Nikki were sitting. "We heard what happened on the news last night," Mary said. "It must have been horrible for you." Nikki cried and asked, "Why didn't you call yesterday and tell us what happened?" "I'm so sorry. I should have called, but yesterday was a horrible day and I really didn't want to talk to anyone," I lied. It wasn't really a complete lie. I just wasn't ready to talk to Nikki. Then, watching Nikki's reaction, I said, "Did you know that Parker died of his wounds?" Nikki lowered her gaze to her hands and shook her head, her eyes filling with tears again. George said, "Yes, it was on the news last night. He's not being mourned in this house." Nikki looked up at me and said, "I'm not crying for him, Eric. I'm crying for what he did to us." "I can't understand what could make a man act like that," Mary said. "Eric, do you know the DA's office called yesterday? They said they weren't going to press any charges against Nikki." I looked at Nikki. "Yeah, I heard. That's good news," I said. Nikki smiled at me, but remained silent. "Mary, I just want to tell you and George how much I appreciate your help and support during this very stressful time," I said. Then, looking at Nikki, I said, "This has been difficult for all of us." Nikki got up from the couch, walked over to me, stood right in front of me and asked, "Can I go home with you?" "No, I'm not going home." "You're not going home? Where are you going?" asked Nikki, looking at me with wide eyes. "I have to take Charlie's car to his house in Las Vegas," said I. Nikki was having another attack of dropsy, but she tried to hold on manfully. "I don't understand. Charlie lives in Sherman Oaks. Why do you have to drive his car to Las Vegas?" asked Nikki. I put my hands on either side of her face, looked directly into her beautiful eyes and said, "I'll explain everything to you on the way to Las Vegas." Nikki wiped tears from her eyes and asked, "You want me to go to Las Vegas with you?" I leaned forward and kissed Nikki on the forehead. Yes, of course I want you to come with me, I said. Nikki wrapped her arms around me and hugged me tightly. George, I need a favor. I have people coming over on Monday to clean up a mess in the kitchen. Do you think you could go over there and stay home while they work? No problem. What time should I be there? Around noon, I said. If you don't mind, Nikki and I should get going. George and Mary walked us to the door. They couldn't hide the smiles on their faces. They were happy to see Nikki and I together again. We need to stop by the house so I can pack clothes, Nikki said as we walked to the car. I've already packed everything you'll need, I replied. So you knew before you even got here that you were going to take me with you? You're my wife, the woman I love. Why would I go anywhere without you? Said I. Nikki grabbed me and kissed me on the lips. You're the man I love. For the first 45 minutes of the ride, Nikki hardly said anything. She just sat silently with a smile on her face. When we got to the interchange from I-10 to I-15, Nikki spoke. Did you pack my clothes? What did you pack? She asked. I packed your underwear. I also packed your sandals and black-heeled shoes that will go with your cocktail dress. All of your makeup I put in the bag as well. Anything else you need, you'll have to buy. Nikki kissed me on the cheek and we started chatting about everything as usual. After a while, Nikki leaned back in his chair and seemed to relax, but I started to notice a change in his mood. I noticed that Nikki was becoming more somber, and eventually I had to ask her what was wrong. Eric, I'm really sorry about what happened. I have to tell you everything so you'll realize that I love you and that nothing ever happened between John and me. I'm just afraid that you might stop trusting me, and if it's true, it could ruin our marriage. I want you to ask me any questions you have. I'll tell you anything you want to know, so please talk to me. I have one question that I would like answered. It's very important, so I need to know the truth, I said. Nikki turned to me. Whatever you ask me, I promise to tell you the truth, he said. Okay. Nikki, Nikki started shaking her head, not waiting for me to finish my question. Were you the one who broke the beer glass? I asked. Nikki was still shaking her head when I finished the question. No. Wait. What? Yes, I did. I broke it, she said. That's the kind of question I wasn't expecting. Obviously. Do you want to know why I broke it? Asked Nikki. No, I already know, I replied. Nikki looked at me with a question in her eyes. Nikki, I love you, and I trust you completely. I now know everything I need to know to move on with my life. This topic doesn't need any further discussion, at least not until we get home next week. I just want to spend the next few days enjoying being together again, I said, as I reached out and took Nikki's hand in mine. The rest of the way to Charlie's house, Nikki was smiling. When we got to the house, I quickly looked around to see if there was any evidence that Parker had broken into the house the night I left Vegas. I found no evidence that Parker had been there. I began to wonder if he saw me leave that night. He knew what I looked like and could recognize me as we passed each other. As we walked into the house, Nikki looked around and said, "This is much better than staying in one of the hotels on the Strip." While Nikki looked around the house, I got 2 cold Heinekens out of the refrigerator. Nikki was in the master bedroom looking out at the pool in the backyard when I handed her the beers. We spent the rest of the day lounging by the pool, and in the evening, Nikki made dinner from the groceries I had bought the previous weekend. It was just spaghetti with ragu sauce and a bottle of red wine, but we had a romantic dinner. Epilogue. I think many of you readers are wondering how I was able to trust Nikki completely again. Did I ignore all the negative possibilities? No. Let me explain. After the IAB investigators left the house on Friday, you may recall that I decided to put something stronger in my coffee. When I went to the pantry to get some bourbon, I happened to glance at the shelf where the flashlight was before I picked it up. Sure enough, the flashlight was no longer there, but in its place was a videotape of Nikki being interviewed at the police station. So along with the bourbon and coffee, I watched the rest of the tape. When I inserted the tape into the VCR and turned on playback, it started right after the last segment I remembered, so I rewound the tape back a little and turned on playback. Detective Harris said, "Was he trying to persuade you? You mean he was trying to seduce you?" "Yes, I guess so," Nikki said. "Did he have any reason to believe that you would agree to have sex with him?" asked Detective Harris. He kept going on and on about what happened in Germany and that we should finish what we started that night. "Mrs. Anderson, Why don't you tell me about what happened between you and Mr. Parker in Germany? Nikki was quiet for a moment and then said, We went to Germany as chaperones for a German club. The club members were invited to visit Germany by a school in Munich. Our students stayed with the families of students from the host school. The 7 chaperones stayed at a local hotel. On the last day of the trip, we went souvenir shopping. I looked in the window of a store that sold all sorts of collectibles. I looked at the Hummels first. I've wanted to start collecting them for a long time, but they're very expensive. Next to the Hummels, I noticed a German beer mug. As soon as I saw it, I immediately knew it was something Eric would like. Why did your husband like that mug? Asked Detective Harris. Eric has a small collection of beer mugs and glasses, but nothing as beautiful as the one I was looking at in the window. Okay, go on then. I discerned the price tag on the mug and calculated that the price in dollars would be over $100. Just then, John came over and asked what I was looking at. I told him I liked the beer mug, but it was too expensive. After that, we collected the students and drove them back to the school where their hosts picked them up. In the evening, the chaperones were invited to dinner by some teachers from the host school. As I was getting ready to leave, John came into my room and said he had a gift for me and handed me an unwrapped box. Inside the box was a beer mug that I had been eyeing for a long time. I told John I couldn't accept such an expensive gift, but he insisted. He said it was a thank you for the help I'd given him when he was settling into our school. Part of me knew I shouldn't accept this gift, but part of me wanted to receive it because I knew Eric would like it. So I thanked John and we went to meet the other chaperones in the hotel lobby. We had dinner at a restaurant near the hotel, and then the host took us to a real beer hall. The Umpa orchestra played there, and our host started teaching us how to dance some German folk dances. We had a great time, and I had too much to drink, so by the time we left to go back to the hotel, I was feeling pretty good. John held my hand as we walked, and I assumed he was just making sure I didn't trip on the cobblestone sidewalk. When we got back to the hotel, John walked me to my room, and when I opened the door, he pulled me to him and kissed me. It surprised me, and I'm afraid I didn't react. So he kissed me again, and for a moment I kissed him back, and then I realized what I was doing and pulled away from him. I told him that what he did was inappropriate, and I shouldn't have let him kiss me a second time. He said he wanted me, and that he knew I wanted him too. I told him he was wrong, and then I pushed him back out into the hallway and closed the door behind me. And that was the end of it? Did Mr. Parker leave you alone after that? Asked Detective Harris. Pretty much. The next day, John apologized for his behavior and blamed it on the fact that he'd had a lot to drink the night before. The rest of the time, he was on his best behavior. So you didn't have sex with Mr. Parker? No. I love my husband and have never cheated on him and never will. 7. When you got home, what did your husband say about the beer mug Mr. Parker gave you? I didn't tell Eric that John gave me the glass. I told him I bought it for him. I got excited when I saw how much Eric liked the statue, but then it hit me that I had just lied to Eric for the first time in our marriage, and I started crying. I almost told him the truth then, and now I wish I hadn't. After the trip, did Mr. Parker try to talk you into going out with him or suggest that you have an affair with him? Asked Detective Harris. He occasionally flirted with me, but never did anything terribly inappropriate. What do you mean by terribly inappropriate? Well, the flirting was inappropriate, but not offensive. He never suggested that we go out or anything like that, that is, until the day of the accident. Why do you say it was an accident? John wouldn't have shot Eric on purpose. He shot Eric by accident. Mrs. Anderson, the shooting wasn't an accident. Mr. Parker knew your husband. He had plenty of time to identify him on the stairs before he shot him. It can't be that Mr. Parker didn't see that your husband was carrying his bags upstairs and that he didn't have a gun. No, that can't be. He wouldn't have done that on purpose, Nikki cried. Mrs. Anderson, when you were hiding in the closet, did you hear gunshots? Yes. Can you describe what you heard? Asked Detective Harris. The first shot was very loud. Then a few seconds passed and the next 2 shots weren't as loud, said Nikki. Do you have any idea why there was a delay between the first shot and the next 2? No. I never thought about it. Mr. Parker waited at the top of the stairs until your husband came down to the landing and turned to face Mr. Parker, said Detective Harris. Mr. Parker then shot your husband in the chest. Mr. Anderson then fell down the landing onto his luggage. Mr. Parker came down the stairs, stood over him, and shot him 2 more times in the abdomen. It was obvious from Mr. Parker's actions that he wanted your husband dead. Nikki put her head down on the table and sobbed. Jim pulled her to him and hugged her and said something to calm her down. And then Jim asked if someone could get Nikki a glass of water. Detective Harris gave Nikki a chance to recover while they waited for the water. "So, Mrs. Anderson, can you give me one reason why Mr. Parker wanted to kill your husband?" asked Detective Harris. Nikki shook her head. "I can't believe he could have done it, and I certainly don't know why." "Say, is there anything else you can tell me that will help us understand why Mr. Parker wanted to shoot your husband?" "I can't think of anything except that now I'm wondering if it has something to do with Sarah Bowden," Nikki said. What makes you think it has anything to do with Ms. Bowden?" "I don't know. It's just that when we were in Germany, John told me to ask Eric if he remembered Sarah Bowden, but then he didn't say why he wanted me to ask him." "Did you ask your husband about Sarah Bowden?" "Yes. He told me he had met her a few times in his junior year of college," Nikki replied. "Did you believe your husband?" "Yes." "All right. Did you tell your husband that it was Mr. Parker who wanted to know?" asked Detective Harris. "No." "Why not?" "I don't know." "Did you see Mr. Parker after the shooting?" asked Detective Harris. "Yes, at school, and he came to the hospital once." "He was at the hospital. Why?" "He said he needed to talk to me, and he wanted to see how Eric was doing." "What did he want to talk to you about?" asked Detective Harris. "He wanted to make sure I didn't tell anyone about what really happened," Nikki replied. "Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. I think we're done for the day," said Detective Harris. "We may want to talk to you again, so check with us before you decide to leave town." Detective Harris stepped away from the desk and walked over to the phone on the wall, picked up the receiver, and spoke to someone. I couldn't hear what the conversation was about. After hanging up, Detective Harris turned to Jim. "Mr. Culkin, can I have a word with you?" said Detective Harris. Jim and Detective Harris huddled together in the corner for a moment, and then Jim led Nikki out of the room. Immediately, the screen went black and then snowy. After reviewing the tape, things had improved a little, but there was still the possibility that Nikki was lying through her ass. I still didn't know what to do with her. That evening, Tony came over to my place for a drink and told me that the DA's office wasn't going to press any charges against Nikki. When I asked why, Tony said that the ADA was confident that Nikki had answered all their questions truthfully. I asked Tony how they could assume that Nikki had not lied to them. Detective Harris asked your friend Jim if Nikki would be willing to take a lie detector test, and Jim said he would discuss it with Nikki and get back to him. Jim called Detective Harris the next day and told him that Nikki had agreed to take the polygraph test, Tony said. During the polygraph test, they checked her answers to all the questions they asked her and asked her if she answered truthfully. They asked the questions several different ways to make sure her answers were correct. Your wife swore that she answered all the questions truthfully, and the polygraph confirmed that she was telling the truth. There was nothing in her test to indicate that she lied in her answers during the initial interview. Nikki is a bright girl, but I knew there was no way she could cheat the polygraph, so I was content to know the truth. Nikki wasn't having an affair with John Parker, and she wasn't even attracted to him. Parker bought her a beer mug to try to get her into a relationship, but Nikki quickly broke it off despite drinking heavily. Why the beer mug turned out to be the only item that was broken when Parker tried to make it look like burglars had visited our house? I was curious. According to Nikki, Parker brought the glass upstairs as a reminder that he had bought it for her, and then tried to talk her into doing it with him based on his interpretation of what had happened in Germany. I guess he thought the fact that she let him kiss her meant she might be interested in something more. That afternoon, I disrupted his plans by entering the house at the appointed time. I was beginning to think that Nikki thought that by accepting that glass as a gift from Parker, she had caused the whole mess herself. I figured she had smashed the glass against the hearth because she knew it would always remind her of what had happened and that it was her fault. That was the only question I needed to get an answer to from Nikki. If she broke the glass, everything would be fine. But if it was Parker who broke it, I was left with doubts. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.